Chapter 348. The thin red figure landed beside Wu Qin. His messy hair danced in the wind. His indifferent eyes looked disdainfully at the sky. His hands were casually folded in front of him. The awe-inspiring gaze from his pupils was domineering and peerless. He despised all living things and faintly revealed the momentum to compete with the vast sky. In the whole world, there is only one person who is so overbearing, Uchiha Madara. Seeing this, Dustless also removed the Kensusunu that covered his body and looked at Madara from the corner of his eyes. His brows slightly wrinkled, and then he relaxed as if nothing happened. Madara in red armor also fell beside Dustless. It seems that there is a deviation from the plan. Dustless, Uchiha Madara's face had clear cracks, his pupils were gloomy black, and his whole body was lifeless. He was not so much a living person who could walk on his own, but a walking corpse possessed by a ghost, without any vitality. Turning his head, Madara's eyes flashed with a cold light. Plan. If everything is as you expect, what is the point of me and Obito's existence? Glancing at Madara calmly, Dustless said calmly. Others may be afraid of Uchiha Madara, but Dustless is not afraid. Even with the existence of the Edo Tensei, a perfect body, Dustless is not afraid. In any case, Uchiha Madara is a dead man, and Dustless does not need to obey him, let alone fear him. Yes. Hearing this, Madara just nodded. Indeed, as Dustless said, if things go as smoothly as he thought, Dustless and Obito really don't need to exist, and maybe the whole world has fallen into the ultimate genjutsu of infinite Tsukimi. Damn Kabuto, it was a mistake not to mention killing you. Dustless's eyes were full of murderous intent. He didn't mean to resurrect Uchiha Madara, and he even wanted to kick him away. After all, this guy is very shrewd, and his strength is unreliable. Especially at this critical moment, Dustless is extremely disgusted with Madara, who may change the situation at will. Find a chance to kill this guy. Not only Dustless has such an idea, but Madara also has the same idea. Although his face is as usual, he also labeled Dustless as a dead man. It is never wrong to remove the uncertain factors in advance. At present, only Nibi is left. The resurrection of the Geto Mazo requires the nine-tailed beast's chakra, and now the Jinchuriki of Nibi has not been obtained, and the resurrection of Jubi has been delayed. Are they here? Raising his eyes leisurely, Wu Chen's sight passed through the layers of space, and 5 strong and magnanimous figures came into his sight. It was like a shot in the arm, and the agitated heart of the joint ninja force calmed down. He stared at Dustless and Madara, and his killing intent was even stronger. Yo! Madara's eyes were full of surprise, and he said, "It's incredible, from their dress, it's obvious that they don't belong to the same country. These ninjas from all over the world will one day work together to deal with the same person, it's really ruthless." It's no wonder that Madara will have such feelings. After all, he lived in the chaotic period of the Warring States period. Not to mention working together, even brothers would kill each other from time to time. With the change of time, people's inner character will naturally change with it. The current period is not the dark age you lived in. Dustless said, and at the same time, he looked straight at Madara and said bluntly, "You just want to see how strong they are." Such a ridiculous excuse, Madara, you're just like a kid who hasn't grown up yet. I just want to see how strong the current Kage is. Hearing this, Madara just smiled indifferently. Frankly, he was really curious about the current strength of the 5 Kage. Dustless, the impatient one, is the kid. What's more, the problem with Obito seems to have not been solved for the time being, and now it's just a golden opportunity. Madara's eyes were filled with awe-inspiring brilliance, and his aura of invincibility made Dustless deeply moved, and he secretly sighed that Madara was worthy of being a peerless hero. Even if several Obitos superimpose together, they may not be as strong as Madara. Play as you wish, but don't underestimate the 5 Kage, lest you fall. Dustless simply sat on the ground, and he was too lazy to pay attention to Madara. This guy was a typical battle maniac. He just looked at the several figures in front of him indifferently. He actually wanted to see how strong Madara was when he fought with all his strength. You fell and bruised your head. If it's possible, I hope so too. As his words fell, Madara's mouth was filled with an insolent and ferocious smile. His whole body roared like a cannonball, and with an invincible momentum, he rushed into the ninja allied forces. Boom! 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 The blazing heat burst out, and looking up, Madara saw a wave of fire with a diameter of more than 10 meters. It was overwhelming, and it was like a wave pressing down on the ninja allied forces. Worthy of the name of Senju Hashirama. Ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu, and genjutsu have all reached the limit. Wu Chen, who was on the mountain top, nodded slightly. His eyes lit up as he praised from the bottom of his heart. Uchiha Madara was perfect, almost impeccable in all aspects. Maybe it's because he's too perfect, so in my eyes, he's full of flaws. Dustless's pale lips raised a bloodthirsty smile, and he secretly sneered. Perfection itself is a kind of imperfection. He thought that he could observe Madara's power, but suddenly, several chakra fluctuations came from behind him. He suddenly turned back, and several old scenes of the past were reflected in his cheeks. Chapter 349. Staring at the familiar faces, Dustless's eyes flashed with a touch of trance, his thoughts turned back, thinking of the time in the past, and sighed leisurely. Long time no see, everyone. Dustless's voice was like a breeze, coupled with his slightly soft smile. It gave people a feeling of spring, especially warm. Several figures reflected in Dustless's eyes were clearly visible. All of them were the Edo Tensei army, all of them were wearing crimson robes, all of them were like the previous Uchiha Madara, all of them were lifeless, like dead people coming out of a coffin. Dustless Uchiha Madara, don't pretend to be a ghost, today I will kill you. A low hiss filled with endless killing intent rang out. Looking up, it was the red-haired youth whose rage level was off the charts. His handsome face was as ferocious as an evil spirit, and the surging hostility caused the surrounding temperature to drop to the freezing point. Just kill you, why do you hate me so much, Sasori? Wu Qin shrugged and said helplessly. He lowered his eyes, which were overflowing with cold light. He said indifferently, you're so restless. I'm afraid that you'll die again before you can see the sunlight and the air. Looking around, he could clearly see Itachi, Deidara, Kakuzu, and Haiden, as well as Sasori. What's the use of shrimp soldiers and crab generals? There is also Kabuto, an idiot seeking his own death. Dustless secretly sneered, his eyes suddenly fixed on Itachi's body, and an indescribable color flashed in his eyes. These people were all ordered by Kabuto to clean up Dustless. Just kill me. Hearing this, even with Sasori's temperament, he was burning with anger. What do you mean just kill me? Humans only have one life. He couldn't hold back his anger, and began to erupt rapidly. His young fists were clenched tightly. He fiercely stared at Dustless, and said in a cold voice, the blood debt of the past will be paid with your life. His 5 fingers were tightly stretched, 5 crystal-clear blue lines were clearly visible, as hard as steel, cutting iron like mud, and could cut the human body into pieces. Get out of my way. When he was about to cut Dustless into pieces, a thin black figure suddenly blocked in front of him, and there was a clear 8 mark on his face. There was no doubt that it was Itachi. Seeing this, Sasori was stunned, and then he warned, don't think that the Uchiha clan's Sharingan is invincible, my art is above your eyes. His gloomy and cold tone was even worse than the bone-chilling cold wind. It was no wonder that Scorpio hated Dustless so. He had nothing to say about dying under the enemy's hands. That was because his own skill was not as good as the enemy's. But to die under the hands of Dustless, one of his own people, he really felt ashamed and sullen. You are not his opponent." Waving his hand to stop Sasori, who was planning to attack alone, Itachi stared at Dustless, who was standing indifferently, and calmly analyzed. He always believed that there is no invincible ninjutsu in the world, including the Edo Tensei that controlled him, and it can also be full of loopholes. So what? Hearing this, Sasori's aura became even more awe-inspiring as he said, "That guy Kabuto gave us the order to get rid of Uchiha Wuchin. Unlimited chakra, a body that won't stop until you die, and what? A body that will never recover." A ghostly sneer suddenly came, interrupting Sasori's cold face, and then he saw a pitch-black shadow almost instantly appear behind Sasori. Amaterasu! Itachi was the first to react, and his pupils turned into scarlet-red Mangekyo Sharingan, and his sight was focused on Dustless's body. Boom! Dustless's thin body suddenly emitted black flames, and his whole body was swallowed by the flames, and it was too horrible to look at. Even the outline of his body couldn't be seen clearly, and it was beyond recognition. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Sasori quickly pulled away from Dustless. "This guy is too dangerous. He should be dead." Deidara's eyes widened as he stared at Dustless, who was swallowed by the Amaterasu, and his tone was a little surprised. So far he hasn't seen anyone who was swallowed by the Amaterasu and was safe and sound. How is it possible? He was actually swallowed. After a while, along with an incredulous voice, Deidara looked up and saw that the black flames burning on Dustless's body were gradually fading away. It was like a super black hole in the depths of the universe, and in an instant, everything was gone. Phew! A sharp sound of breaking the air rang out, and the calm air swept up a strong air wave. Wu Chen, who was reflected in the eyes, disappeared without a trace. His breath trace blended into the void. When he flashed once more, he appeared beside Sasori of the red sand. So fast! The pitch-black shadow covered the sun, and Scorpion felt a chill in his heart. Just as he was about to retreat again, he suddenly felt his body become light. His whole body was free of gravity, and he was floating in the air. Looking down, he saw Dustless with a strange smile on his face, holding Sasori's neck with one hand and letting him float in the air. "You people are really sad. It's enough to be killed once. Now you are resurrected, and you are going to be killed again." Hearing this, the members of Edo Tensei looked at each other, and they could see the disdain in each other's eyes. When everyone was about to snort, they were shocked to find that Dustless's arm was emitting some kind of strange energy fluctuation. Sasori's body was slowly collapsing. In just a blink of an eye, Sasori, who had threatened to retaliate before, was completely annihilated. Even the powerful body of Edo Tensei couldn't be repaired, and directly disappeared. Chapter 350. Yin-Yang Release is the nemesis of all ninjutsu in the world. It is the natural enemy of all ninjutsu in the world. Even the Edo Tensei with infinite chakra is no exception. When they come into contact with Yin-Yang Release, they will turn into ashes. Gulp. It had to be said that the members of Akatsuki organization had witnessed countless bizarre techniques, and had trained a formidable immunity, but facing such a strange situation, they still couldn't help but choke with sobs, and absent-mindedly, their face was filled with disbelief. Sasori was killed by him just like that. Deidara choked and said with a trembling voice. Such a strange situation, he has seen it for the first time in his life. Looking at Dustless, a touch of fear flashed in his eyes, and he subconsciously took a step back. It wasn't until Sasori resurrected that he knew how crazy and terrifying this man was. Even if he was a teammate, killing him was just a matter of a thought from Dustless. As long as Dustless judged that he was no longer useful, even if he was a god, he would also lie under his blade in fear. "Even if I die again, I will drag you down with me." The hesitation in his eyes was quickly replaced by cold killing intent. Deidara's face was crazy. He didn't have a good impression of the Uchiha family. The first time he fell in the hands of Dustless, the second time was in the hands of Itachi, and then he died in the hands of Sasuke. It can be said that he and the Uchiha family have an irreconcilable hatred. Pucci, without thinking, he directly used his strongest move. He tore his crimson robe, revealing a big mouth on his chest, and immediately fed a lot of explosive clay. This guy is going to use that jutsu as soon as he came up. The faces of the Akatsuki members who were hit by Edo Tensei changed dramatically. As Deidara's former teammates, they naturally knew some of Deidara's jutsu, and Deidara died because of this jutsu. However, when he remembered that everyone had an immortal body, he quickly felt relieved. He looked at Wuchen calmly and leisurely. Art is explosion. My ultimate art is self-destruction. Go to hell. Staring at the crazy dead ale, Dustless was calm and composed. The so-called art was of no use to him. From the beginning of this boring duel, he was in an invincible position. Boom boom boom, after a burst of dazzling light, an explosion that covered an area of dozens of kilometers resounded through the clouds. Waves of destruction swept out like a hurricane, like the embodiment of the law of destruction. Everything that came into contact with the white light and the air waves produced by the explosion was instantly annihilated. On the ground, a huge crater was clearly visible, as if it had been hit by a meteorite. It was a complete mess. In the sky, the lazy white clouds that had been surging before were also shattered. There was not even a trace of their existence left behind. Everything had returned to its original state. If it weren't for Uchiha Sasuke using Manda to avoid Deidara's self-destruction, he would definitely be in the same situation as the current scene. Even the members of the Akatsuki organization who were reincarnated by the Edo Tensei were also crushed. However, since they had reincarnated by the Edo Tensei, they recovered in the blink of an eye. Was he killed? Deidara, who should have died, also recovered. Seeing that Dustless had disappeared, the corners of his mouth raised into a smile, and his unscrupulous laughter resounded through the clouds. Sorry to disappoint you. After a while, the sarcastic voice that shouldn't have appeared made Deidara's expression immediately collapse, and his face was gloomy. Deidara. You should know that I am immune to physical attacks. For physical attack-type ninjas like you, I am your natural enemy. The dazzling light gathered all over the sky and condensed into Dustless's body. He was unscathed, and there was a smile on his face. Don't be too complacent, Uchiha Dustless. Flying Duan, who had sharp eyes and quick hands, immediately flashed behind Dustless. The big scythe in his hand went through Dustless's body and directly cut him in half. You are the one who is too complacent. The dazzling golden light gathered on the right side of Flying Duan. Dustless' body began to condense and materialize. At the same time, he leaped up. His ordinary feet were filled with indescribable danger. Flying Duan instinctively retreated and hurriedly pulled back its scarlet scythe, wanting to use it to block Dustless' attack. However, the strange scene made everyone's jaws drop. How is this possible? Dustless's ordinary leg, without any strength, touched the sharp scythe, the latter directly collapsed, and in just a moment, it was completely corroded. Pucci. This scene happened too fast, and in a flash, Haydn didn't have time to react, and the leg that swept over his head directly separated his head from his body. His body, like Sasori before, began to slowly peel off and collapse. The name of this jutsu is Yin-Yang Release, the strongest jutsu that can be launched after gathering the power of the Uchiha and Senju clans. Of course, through some other channels, Yin-Yang Release can also be used, and its ability is naturally, as you have seen, it can make most of the ninjutsu in the world invalid. Any matter that comes in contact with it will collapse. Looking at Itachi, Deidara, and the last three people, Dustless explained directly. How dare you be so arrogant? Clenching his iron fist, Deidara shouted unhappily. Dustless bluntly told them the ability of Yin-Yang Release, which was a direct slap in their face, and contempt for them. Akatsuki is full of S-class rebellious ninjas, and Deidara has always thought that everyone is the same kind of people, and there is no difference in status and strength. Dustless looked at them as if they were ants, and Deidara's heart has long been filled with anger. Actually, killing you is just a matter of a moment. It will end here. Chapter 351. As Dustless's voice fell, Deidara and Kakuzu's expression changed. Their eyes were filled with anger. Dustless's words meant that killing them in seconds was just a matter of seconds. Are you surprised and sad? Dustless smiled at the indignant Deidara and Kakuzu, and the corner of his mouth curled into a mocking arc, and he said, "Don't show such an unhappy face. It sounds like a fantasy, but the actual situation is like this. Pucci." Suddenly, without even a scream, Deidara's chest was directly penetrated by Dustless. The black iron rod penetrated his whole body, and his body slowly collapsed. What a joke! Looking at the black iron rod in his abdomen, Deidara roared unwillingly, and his eyes were filled with madness like a dying beast. When he exhausted all his strength and was about to use self-explosion again, the black iron rod suddenly sent out a more ferocious force and directly annihilated him. From the beginning to the end of the world, it was only a few seconds. This was the strength of Dustless. In such a short time, he could easily kill a Kage-level powerhouse after Edo Tensei. The next one is you. He appeared strangely like a ghost and disappeared strangely like a ghost. He came and went without a trace. She realized that when Wuchen appeared, he might have already been separated by the heavens and the earth forever, just like Deidara before. Kakuzu also faced such a scene. How is it possible? The hair on his body stood up, and Kakuzu's pupils widened. He looked at Dustless in front of him in disbelief. This speed that was beyond common sense was completely incomprehensible, and he couldn't defend against it. He could only passively take a beating. Without the slightest hesitation, silver lightning swept over his body, and crackled continuously, forming a thick silver coat around himself, hoping to defend against Dustless's attack. Boring, this kind of ordinary ninjutsu can't stop me. Shaking his head, the black iron rod in his hand came out. With a puchi sound, it directly penetrated Kakuzu's body after Edo Tensei, leaving an obvious big hole in his abdomen. The ugly black hole was like a black hole in the depths of the universe, and with this as the center, it swallowed Kakuzu's body. In this case, only you are left, Itachi. Withdrawing leisurely, he turned a deaf ear to Kaku. Dustless looked at Itachi with interest and asked, "You can be so calm in front of me. What tricks do you have up your sleeve? I'm really looking forward to it, but let me give you a piece of advice. If it's an ordinary physical attack, such as a boring and powerless technique like Susanoo, it's best for you to stop now." Dustless could elementalize at will, which also meant that he could ignore more than 99% of physical attacks in the world. Dustless also once said this to Itachi. "Of course, I know your ability." Hearing this, Dustless with Duan's words said SSSSSSS. This is interesting. With a flash of surprise in his eyes, Dustless also began to look at his younger brother seriously. Suddenly, he remembered that Itachi's Mangekyos disappeared. When he was about to ask if he gave it to Sasuke, an indescribable ancient aura suddenly appeared. Even Dustless and Uchiha Madara, who was teasing the 5 Kages, were stunned, and looked at the void in the distance. The strong energy fluctuation almost crushed the whole world, and an unprecedented throbbing could be felt from dozens of kilometers away. This violent chakra. It can't be wrong. In his mind, he suddenly recalled the top creature that could destroy heaven and earth. Wu Chen's eyes could not help but be filled with greed and fanaticism. His greed was even more obvious. Daydreaming is not over yet. No matter what your purpose is, you will embark on an alternative path of redemption. Itachi's dark eyes were full of determination, and his voice was heavy, with a faint sense of relief. As long as he uses that technique, everything will be over. Just by you. After so many years, you are still as naive as ever, Itachi. Dustless, who returned to his senses, sneered and said without exaggeration. Even if Itachi's strength in this state soared 10 times, Dustless wouldn't think that he did it himself. When he was about to open his mouth mode to attack this kid, Itachi's voice came in advance. I don't think you can understand this jutsu. I was going to use it on Sasuke. But now it's your turn. His pupils focused on Dustless's eyes. Itachi's Sharingan quickly turned, and the strange luster pulsed with mysterious fluctuations, and his eyes suddenly began to rage. Staring at Dustless's eyes, he suddenly shouted, Izanami! Soon after Itachi's voice fell, Dustless's shining pupils lost their color, like a gem covered with sand, and the original brilliance disappeared in an instant. Dustless's eyes were empty and gray, as if his soul was taken away and he lost the direction of life. The cause and effect of all this is finally over. Seeing Dustless like this, Itachi breathed a sigh of relief, and at the same time, the eyes that had just activated Izanami closed and permanently lost their light. Izanami is one of the ultimate genjutsu of the Uchiha family, and it is one of the ultimate genjutsu of the Uchiha family. Once it is used, it will fall into an infinite cycle. This ninjutsu cannot be broken. Only when the victim admits the purpose of the caster, Izanami will be automatically lifted, so the mind of the victim will change. So it can be called an invincible existence, and if you want to break it, you have to know yourself again. Puchi. Just when Itachi thought it was all over, a black iron rod flew toward him and directly penetrated his body, and his body began to collapse. Looking up, the initiator was Dustless with a smile on his face. Chapter 352. His pupils dilated, staring at the black iron stick that penetrated his chest. He subconsciously reached out to touch it, but unexpectedly, when he touched it, his entire arm began to fester and disintegrate. How is it possible? Izanami should be unsolvable. Forcibly suppressing his inner uneasiness, Itachi asked in a low voice, and his tone was full of disbelief and confusion. He was sure that Dustless was affected by Izanami's jutsu. However, as if nothing had happened, he used yin-yang release to make him collapse and dissipate. Unsolvable. Hearing this, Dustless just glanced at Itachi and said softly, Any jutsu in the world has its unknown weaknesses, isn't this what you said before? Unsolvable jutsu is called unsolvable, but it doesn't mean it's invincible. Itachi's mouth moved slightly, and his eyes flashed with a touch of emotion. He wanted to refute, but he couldn't refute it. All jutsu have unknown weaknesses, but so far, Izanami has been unsolvable. This is the ultimate forbidden jutsu of the Uchiha clan, and no one is immune to it. Sharingan is known as the Eye of the Soul. When you open Mangekyo, different jutsu will be born in each person's eyes. Of course, there are some incredible things that happen. For example, all three of us have a jutsu called Amaterasu in our eyes. Dustless said, although his tone was friendly, he was very sure. From this, it was not difficult to see that the jutsu born from Mangekyo Sharingan also had a subtle relationship with bloodline inheritance. Dustless still remembered that Uchiha Sasuke also had Amaterasu in his eyes. When he caught Hachibi Killer Bee, he didn't integrate Itachi's eyes, but he could use Amaterasu, which explained everything. Including Uchiha Madara can also use Amaterasu. Could it be that you have a jutsu born in your eyes that can resist Izanami? Itachi himself was a smart person, and after Dustless's slight reminder, his pupils were like waking up from a dream, and a touch of understanding flashed in his eyes. Genjutsu such as Koto Amatsukami and Izanami are invincible and perfect, but the jutsu born in Dustless's eyes seems to be deliberately resisting these jutsu. Staring at Wuchin's left and right eyes, Itachi had thousands of words in his heart. He knew Wuchin's life. Compared with him and Sasuke, Wuchin's childhood was extremely miserable. He suffered from turbulence and saw the world's coldness and warmth. Perhaps it was such a cruel life that caused his life to change, his temperament to change, and his pursuit of life to change. So when he opened Mangekyo, he was born to resist this incredible jutsu. When I activated the kaleidoscope, my right eye gave birth to the omniscient and omnipotent technique. It can ignore and be immune to any illusions in the world that I know. Whether it's the so-called Kodo Emitsukumi or Izanami, they can't affect me. Dustless is immune to the so-called infinite Tsukumi. Even if there are thousands of methods, he can deal with them one by one. As the name says, omniscient and omnipotent, he knows everything. Knowing that I'm immune to physical attacks, you can use genjutsu to fight against me, much stronger than them. Dustless said indifferently, unfortunately, not only physical attacks don't work on me, but genjutsu also don't work on me. From the time I opened Mangekyo Sharingan, no one in this world can cause fatal damage to me. Dustless's voice fell. Itachi's Edo Tensei body has disappeared. You're next. Looking at the distant sky, Dustless's eyes were cold, and at the same time, he looked at Madara who was teasing the 5 Kages, and the cold light in his eyes was deeper and more substantial. Luster rose from his entire body, enveloping the void like the sun. Wu Qin hid in the void and disappeared without a trace. From now on, it also means that the cooperation between Dustless and Uchiha Madara is terminated. Whether it is Uchiha Obito, Uchiha Madara, or Black Setsu, from now on, they are all enemies of Dustless. Ambitious brat. Turning his head and staring at the disappearing rainbow light behind him, Madara sneered. At the same time, chakra rose again, and Kansusanu's body became bigger. Azure brilliance shrouded the sky, and the ferocious and terrifying Tengu armor was draped over the mature Susanu's head, and a simple and heavy armor appeared all over its body. It had 2 heads and 4 arms, and the 2 long swords at its waist were clearly visible. It's Uchiha Madara's complete body, Kansusanu. For the 5 Kages, the blue light originally belonged to the light of hope, but at this moment, their hearts were desperate. The 100-meter-high giant was a godlike existence for them. The difference between the 2 sides is too big. Even if Uchiha Madara doesn't use the Rinnegan ability, he can just rely on Kansusanu's complete body to sweep them. Madara-sama, the hoarse and gloomy voice suddenly sounded in their minds, and Madara's invincible attack suddenly stopped, and the sharp sword in Kansusanu's hand also stopped. Black Setsu. Samsara's eyes were gloomy, and Madara's tone was a little heavy. There was only one Jubi, but there were 3 competitors, and the ninja allied forces were eyeing it. Uchiha Dustless has already passed, and the target should be the 9-tailed beasts. In their minds, Black Setsu's voice sounded again, with a hint of worry. He doesn't think that Obito is the opponent of Dustless, the beast of the deep sea. Dustless with his giant teeth can easily tear Obito apart. 9-tailed beasts. Shouldn't the Jubi be resurrected? The previous energy fluctuation shouldn't be from the 9-tailed beasts. Frowning slightly, Kansusanu's complete body, Madara's face was full of doubts. The energy fluctuation that spread out just now was obviously not from a tailed beast. This is Uchiha Madara, the tailed beast that the world is afraid of. In his eyes, it's just a small pet that can be pinched at will. Even the Jubi, he doesn't care about it. It's just an existence that he can play with at will. Chapter 353. The energy fluctuation that spread out before was obviously not from the bijou. Madara asked himself that no one knew the bijou better than him. When he controlled the Kyuubi to challenge Hashirama, he had a unique understanding of the strength of the bijou. The strength of the pets is just a so-so, and the energy fluctuation just now is obviously stronger than the Kyuubi. The violent chakra fluctuation before, even Madara felt a palpitation. The strongest bijou is the Kyuubi, but he has fought side by side with the Kyuubi, and he naturally knows the Kyuubi. The energy fluctuation is obviously not from the QB, and it can even be said that it is completely different. Although the QB is strong, it is not enough to shake the world. The Nibi's Jinchuriki Yujito has already fallen into the hands of Obito. The Bijidama just now gathered the yin chakra of the QB, as well as the other 8 Bijidama. It should also contain the charm of the Jubi. Black Setsu said in a deep voice, after all, the Bijidama condensed by the power of the 9 Bijidama is equivalent to the Jidama of the Jubi to some extent. So that's how it is. Hearing this, Madara's eyes flashed, and he remembered that Dustless's goal was the Jubi, and his mouth suddenly swept with a gloomy smile. It's impossible for Obito to give the Bijidama and the Jubi to Dustless. When the time comes, it will be inevitable for them to fight. Naturally, there will be casualties. Dustless and Obito will fight to the end, but whether Obito dies or not, it will be good news for Madara. You go and watch Obito and Dustless to prevent them from making any uncontrollable situation. I will play with these 5 Kage for a while. Although it's a pity that he can't see the scene of Dustless and Obito killing each other, it's good to play with these so-called Kage, at least it won't be boring. Hearing this, Black Setsu didn't dare to say more, and he withdrew from Madara's mind. After all, the real boss now was Madara, and Black Setsu was just a will created by Madara. Staring at the dense ninja coalition below, the Kensusunu gathered on his body shrunk strangely, and he still had 2 heads and 4 arms. What was unusual was that the 2 Kensusunu and Uchiha Madara were also making strange hand seals, giving people a feeling of danger. Consider this a thank you gift for entertaining me, 5 Kages. As Madara's voice fell, his chakra suddenly surged, and the vast and majestic chakra stirred the world. The dark clouds above the void collapsed as if something from outer space blocked the sky. The earth was dark and gloomy, full of some kind of indescribable despair. Tingai quaking star. After Madara's roar, the clouds instantly burst. Looking up, a giant meteorite with a size of 15 kilometers fell from the sky, almost crushing the entire sky. The huge meteorite filled the void and slowly fell under the incredulous gaze of all the ninja coalition forces. Gulp! Without exception, the ninja coalition forces all widened their eyes, and their faces were full of horror. They unconsciously choked, and some even directly retreated, looking at the huge meteorite in the sky in fear. The visual impact caused by the falling meteorite was unparalleled. Looking at Madara standing indifferently, all the ninja coalition forces classified him as a god. Summoning such a terrible meteorite, only a god can do it. It was also inevitable that Madara was labeled as a god in everyone's heart. Many people simply turned around and ran away. Stupid, the Tingai earthquake star covers the ground for several kilometers. With your level, it's useless no matter how you escape. Seeing this, Madara's eyes flashed with ridicule, and then he stood leisurely in Kensusunu's hand, looking down at the ninjas below. His cold voice resounded between heaven and earth. Uchiha Madara is a peerless ninja with the same name as Hashirama Senju. When people talk about Uchiha Madara, they will talk about Hashirama Senju. Similarly, when people talk about Hashirama, they will think of Uchiha Madara. You people are not worthy of being compared to me, including Yukage. Ordinary people are not worthy to fight with me. Madara's face was filled with arrogance, and his majestic voice was accompanied by chakra waves, resounding in every corner between heaven and earth. Although extremely arrogant, no one dared to refute, including Inoki, Tsunade, Reikage, and Mei. These so-called Kage were full of shame. In front of Madara, they were not worth mentioning, they were extremely fragile. This was an undeniable fact. Despair. Flee. Scatter and flee like ants. After saying that, Madara closed his eyes and held his hands in front of him. His long black hair fluttered in the wind, and the falling Mengetsu also locked him inside. However, compared to the ninja coalition, Madara was fearless. Boom! Suddenly, a monstrous explosion was heard in the void. The ear-piercing rumbling sound was like thunder. It seemed as if something had shattered. Raising his head, he saw countless meteorite fragments falling down from the sky. What? Uchiha Madara was slightly startled, and his eyes flashed with a little surprise. He looked at the void, and then looked down at the debris under his feet and around him, frowning slightly. He looked up and looked directly at the void hidden in the clouds, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. In a trance, he vaguely saw a golden beam of light shuttling through two meteorites. This should be impossible, right? Madara's calm expression suddenly stiffened, and his face was full of gloominess, and his expression was a little unbelievable, even if he hid it well. Chapter 354. In the sky, large and small fragments were peeling off, and the two giant meteorites were like this, especially the one at the top, which showed signs of collapse. Retreat, prepare to evade. Inoki and the others naturally didn't know what was going on, but seeing the meteorite showing signs of collapse, they cried with joy and quickly ordered the ninja coalition to retreat at full speed and prepare to defend against the meteorite. After all, whether it's Madara or the meteorite, no matter how many people there are, it won't work. It's incredible, I didn't expect that after my death, this pedantic, ignorant, and cursed world would give birth to so many unprecedented people. Others may not see what's going on, but Madara's vision was excellent, and with the powerful Rinnegan, he could see everything clearly. Incredible people, I didn't expect that in this world. In addition to Dustless and Hashirama, there are people who can fight with me. Looking straight into the depths of the void, Madara was talking to himself, but the meaning revealed in his tone was obviously the opposite of joy, not the slightest fear. His whole body was as silent as the Dead Sea, without any fluctuations. The chakra was surging again, full of eagerness. There are only two kinds of people in the whole world, the weak are sad, and the strong are lonely. Uchiha Madara is the second kind of person. The feeling of being invincible is worse than death for him. Madara is a warlike person. Now that there is a character who can be on par with him, how can he not be excited? Madara could easily see that in the sky above the two meteorites, there was a golden luster that stretched endlessly, without a limit at all. It's coming. His pupils suddenly shrank, Madara's nerves were tense, and his body trembled slightly. Even though he was already dead, his body was sweating. Of course, all of this was due to the fact that he was too happy. Whoosh! The golden light sword suddenly trembled, as if it was commanded by God, and a bright brilliance flashed through the air, aiming at the super-large meteorite below, whistling down. Boom boom boom, the intact meteorite exploded, and a golden beam of light swept down. It was as if a tiger had entered a flock of sheep. The beam of light was extremely sharp, and it cut through all obstacles. In the blink of an eye, the meteorite was split apart, and it poured down without any obstruction. It gave people the feeling that it was cutting through tofu. What a powerful technique. Seeing this, Madara's face was gloomy, and his eyes were cold. The golden light was invincible. In the blink of an eye, the top meteorite was split in half. Boom boom boom, the scene of the meteorite, which was more than 10 kilometers in size, exploding was also very frightening. The two halves of the meteorite fell from the sky, covering a vast area. Buzz buzz buzz, the golden light destroyed the heavens and the earth, annihilating the heavens with a flick of a finger. The boundless void faintly hummed, as if begging for mercy. Under that boundless long and narrow beam of light, all living things were insignificant and couldn't withstand a single blow. The momentum of the bright straight rainbow did not diminish, but it flashed more gorgeous and dazzling, and with a more ferocious force, the sword cut through the second meteorite, Puchi. Puchi, the brilliance penetrated deep into the meteorites, but its power was still unstoppable. Everything in its way was instantly turned into ashes. It was so fragile that the two giant meteorites had no way to fight back. This technique. It can be used with my Rinnegan. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is also the power of God." The gloominess on his face disappeared, and Madara said. Rinnegan was the eyes of the Sage of Six Paths, and it was a veritable eye of creation and destruction. Of course, Madara no longer regarded himself as a human being, but as a god. Rinnegan was the eye of God. He could open Rinnegan, and he was naturally a godlike existence. Even if he was still a mortal body, even if it was the body of the Edo Tensei, Madara thought that he was a human being. But a god, the only god. Boom boom boom, in just a few breaths of time, the two meteorites that covered the sky were cut in half, and the meteorite fragments that filled the sky fell down. The golden light also reached its limit, dimmed, and then disappeared into the layers of the void without a trace. In the sky, groups of meteorites roared down, and the number was as dense as a rainstorm. The entire ninja coalition forces was hit by this meteorite rain. Of course, Madara was also in the range of these meteorites. A mere speck of sand wants to taint the body of a god. What nonsense! Madara looked up at the sky, and the corner of his mouth raised a domineering and arrogant smile. The invincible breath of his body was almost tangible, and the pressure made people breathless. Ken Susanoo. Chakra suddenly boiled, and a blue giant with a height of 100 meters was formed, wearing a Tengu helmet, a heavy ancient armor, a long sword at the waist, 2 heads and 4 arms. There is no doubt that only Madara's complete body Ken Susanoo was like this. Ring ring ring, a steel-like sound suddenly sounded, and suddenly looked up, and saw the long sword in Ken Susanoo's hand was unsheathed, and the long sword was full of sharpness. Weak. Uchiha Madara shook his head disdainfully. His mind moved slightly, and Susanoo moved with him. Its huge body didn't move, but when it moved, it was like a thunderbolt, and the earth trembled and jumped. Madara stared at the meteorites falling from the sky, and the boundless number almost crushed the sky, and the vast day turned into a black night. Boring. After saying that, Susanoo swept the great sword in his hand horizontally, and the awe-inspiring aura energy that could destroy all things directly shot out. Accompanied by a loud roar, the dark sky suddenly turned into daytime. In just one thought, the meteorites all over the sky turned into nothingness. This is the true portrayal of Uchiha Madara, and the fate of all things depends on his will. Chapter 355. Uchiha Madara's strength was beyond doubt. He was on par with Senju Hashirama during his lifetime. After faking his death, he seized Hashirama's cells and finally led to the power of the 6 paths and opened the Rinnegan. For countless years, excluding the Sage of the 6 Paths, Uchiha Madara was the only one who opened the Rinnegan. His strength was absolutely invincible. After opening the Rinnegan, even Hashirama wasn't his opponent. Boring, how can I be hit by my own technique? The sky cleared, and Madara's eyes were indifferent, and the long sword in his hand returned to the scabbard. It would be ridiculous if Uchiha Madara was hit by his own technique. Silver Will Reincarnation Explosion. Along with a shout, a strong chakra fluctuation suddenly appeared from the side, and a tornado swept over like a sharp blade. Bastard! Madara's face suddenly became gloomy. Ken Susanoo's huge body was not easy to dodge, and such a hasty sneak attack made him a live target for a while. Pucci, the blade-like hurricane scattered, and in the blink of an eye, the huge body of Ken Susanoo was swallowed. In a few seconds, the Ken Susanoo, which was known as the Absolute Defense, collapsed. It was not difficult to see that there was no invincible technique. Madara's Ken Susanoo was very powerful, but the Tensigan's Dojutsu was also powerful. There was no reason for it to be weaker than the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, especially the hurricane generated by the Silver Will Reincarnation Explosion once ran through the moon. Madara's body naturally became the target of these blade storms, and for a time, he was also cut to pieces, but because of the Edo Tensei, these physical attacks did not work on him. Sure enough, as Dustless said, his Edo Tensei is equivalent to an invincible existence. The beautiful woman with long silver hair was quite surprised. This Edo Tensei can be called an invincible existence. Chakra is infinite, immortal, and indestructible. No matter what injury, it will recover. It is really enough to go against the heavens. Looking closely, it was the only beautiful woman who Dustless had a real husband and wife relationship with him, Otsutsuki Hagoromo. At this moment, she has entered the chakra mode of the Tensigen. Her whole body was filled with an emerald color, and her aura was strong. Her form was different from a normal human being's, and it added a little strangeness. But this doesn't work on me. Edo Tensei is invincible to others, but it won't work on me. Her thin lips curled into a charming smile. Her bell-like laughter was like the sound of nature, pleasing to the ears. With a gentle wave of her slender hand, the green prayer beads behind her floated in front of her. With a slight thought, these mysterious pearls turned into a black liquid substance, changing according to Yuluo's will. A woman. And this seems to have a very familiar feeling. In the sword storm, the devastated Uchiha Madara's face was blue, and his killing intent was rampant. It was the first time he suffered such a loss. His Edo Tensei body was put to death by 1,000 cuts. The speed just now was really too fast, and at the same time, this strange tornado technique was also really too strong. It almost instantly invaded the complete body Susanu's interior, and by the time it reacted, it was already too late. Whoosh! Several consecutive sounds of breaking the air sounded, and the black iron rods came straight at Madara in the storm. These black iron rods were filled with an indescribable danger. Even Uchiha Madara couldn't help but feel an unprecedented danger. Without thinking, Madara also condensed several black iron rods and threw them back. Clang! The roar of steel sounded, and there were flashing sparks in the void, and some twisted iron rods appeared on the ground. This girl. Although I don't know where she came from, it seems that she can use a technique similar to yin-yang release. And what's going on with her strange mode? Ignoring the chakra storm that raged on his body, he saw several black iron rods on the ground twisted out of shape. Madara's pupils narrowed. The technique that can offset yin-yang release means that the technique used by the other party is similar to his in some aspects. In particular, this strange mode made Madara frown, and he instinctively smelled danger. Get out of my way. Endless chakra emerged from the body of the Edo Tensei, and the powerful fluctuations began to spread quietly. The void around him suddenly stirred up invisible ripples, and almost in the blink of an eye, it spread to the horizon. Worthy of being the first man to open Rinnegan, it's really not an ordinary thing, strong enough. A weak wave of air brushed past Uchiha Madara's body. She just smiled faintly, and the green beads turned into a black defensive wall to protect Uchiha Madara. Super Shinra Tensei. A huge wave of air broke out of the body and spread out like a wave board. Everything in contact with it was annihilated, and the raging hurricane was suppressed in an instant. With Uchiha Madara as the center, a few kilometers-long pit suddenly appeared on the ground, and the blade storm around him disappeared without a trace. Compared to the original Uzumaki Nagato, he was not at the same level at all. Long time no see, Uchiha Madara, we meet again. I didn't expect you to be so embarrassed, so ugly. Removing the defensive wall condensed by the truth-seeking ball, Uchiha Madara narrowed her eyes, and said with a faint sense of ridicule in her voice. The first time she saw Uchiha Madara, he was an old monster. Although his state was much better than before, the Edo Tensei was still difficult to see. It turned out to be you, the woman called Uchiha Madara brought by Dustless. Hearing this, Madara's face suddenly became gloomy. He naturally smiled at Uchiha Madara's ridicule. He didn't expect the little girl to be so extraordinary. By the way, my surname is... Otsutsuki. Chapter 356. Madara's expression stiffened when he heard this. When he was still alive, he secretly guessed the origin of this woman, but he didn't expect it to be so big. The surname Otsutsuki was extraordinary and unique. It could even be said that it was the surname of the god of creation. Otsutsuki. What's your relationship with the six paths Sennin? Madara's face immediately became gloomy. He didn't think that this was just a random coincidence. At the moment, Uchiha Luo's state and her means were similar to Enyang release. Madara couldn't help but imagine that she was a direct descendant of the Otsutsuki family. Of course there is a relationship, Uchiha Luo bluntly admitted, but most of the ancestors of the Otsutsuki family are from the Himura branch, and they don't have much to do with the six paths Sennin. The only descendants of the six paths Sennin were Senju, Uchiha, and Uzumaki. The Otsutsuki family was the Otsutsuki family, and there was an essential difference between them and the Uchiha and Senju. Traitor who stole the heretic demon statue, today is the day you step into the land of eternal damnation. Uchiha Luo was too lazy to talk nonsense. She had a deep and sneaky hatred for Madara. If he didn't steal the Geto Mazo, the Otsutsuki family wouldn't have been destroyed because of the civil war. The initiator of all this is naturally Uchiha Madara, the culprit. Go to hell. Hearing this, Madara sneered and said disdainfully, "Little girl, I admit that your strength is good, and you can fight with me, but in the face of my immortal body, how can you retaliate against me?" Uchiha Luo stood indifferently, and his purple eyes were full of contempt. Enyang release was the natural enemy of the 10,000 things, but Madara didn't think that this little girl could take him down. My task is just to delay time and wait for Dushless to get everything of the Jubi. You should know what your end will be without me telling you. Uchiha Luo looked at Madara with a smile and said very casually. Her task was just to delay, and there was no need to fight to the death. Well, I have long guessed that he would tear up the contract of cooperation, but I didn't expect it to be so early. According to my guess, it should be after teaming up to clean up the ninja coalition, then Wu Qin will attack me. Uchiha Madara said in a hoarse voice. Samsara's eyes flashed with a cold light. In his view, doing so would only benefit the coalition forces. Harming others without benefiting oneself. You're right. Dustless is indeed a far cry from you. But as the saying goes, the clumsy bird flies first. It's ridiculous that you think he's unprepared. Boom boom boom, as if to verify Yu Luo's thoughts, intense chakra fluctuations suddenly came from the boundless void. They were extremely majestic and contained the vitality of life. This chakra. Is it Hashirama's? Noticing the scattered chakra fluctuations, Madara's face became more ugly. If it was only Hashirama's chakra, he clearly perceived Hashirama's chakra. In addition, there were other strong chakra fluctuations. Dustless did a lot of things in the years I was dead. Taking a deep breath, Madara also calmed down. Dustless was an ambitious person. If he didn't have any trump cards in these years, it would be ridiculous to directly tear up the cooperation agreement and attack him. But even so, Madara couldn't help but feel angry. Dustless's approach was tantamount to indirectly announcing his usefulness. It has always been him who used others to squeeze their value and then abandon them. This time, it was him. Yu Luo was just silent with a smile on his face. In fact, it was more than that, including Hinata, Conan, Cheyenne, and Red Lotus, who were regarded as relatives. At this moment, they were slaughtering the ninja coalition and the White Zetsu army. Their means were unheard of. The lowest strength of several women was at the Kage level. All of them were wearing the uniform of the Akatsuki organization. Of course, this was the exclusive Akatsuki of Dustless. They were all strong enough to fight 10 or even hundreds of people. The Edo Tensei of the past Hokage and the new Akatsuki organization formed a beautiful scenery. Whether it was the Ninja Coalition or the White Zetsu, they were all killed mercilessly. So what? You think you can deal with me? It didn't matter how many White Zetsu died. Anyway, they were just made casually. They were originally chess pieces. If they could be used, then so be it. If they couldn't be used, then there was not much loss. With a gloomy smile, Uchiha Madara stared at Yuluo and said hoarsely, "Anne, I think you're a sheep in a tiger's mouth." After saying that, Rinnegan's eyes surged with endless cold light. His line of sight locked onto Yuluo's body. Ripples surged out from Rinnegan's eyes, and his pupils widened. An extremely dangerous aura drifted out from his body. Will Grave, border prison. On the other side, a different scene was playing. How did these two get together again? Dustless was speechless. With his excellent vision, he could clearly see the two figures fighting with the nine-tailed beasts. One of them was Uchiha Sasuke, and the other one was shining with a bright golden light and covered by Kyuubi's chakra. Naturally, it was Uzumaki Naruto. Dustless hoped that Sasuke could kill Naruto, but he didn't expect these two to play together again. However, after just glancing at Sasuke and Naruto, Dustless was too lazy to explore the relationship between the two. His eyes just swept past them and fell directly on the Geto Mazo under Obito's feet. The Geto Mazo opened its big mouth full of fangs and spat out countless iron chains with a purple luster. On the other side, the nine-tailed beasts were bound. "I wanted to make you the Jubi's Jinchuriki. But since that old bastard Uchiha Madara resurrected in advance, this matter ends here." Dustless's eyes suddenly surged with cold light, and his murderous aura exploded. Chapter 357. The chain spat out from the Geto Golem's mouth tightly bound the tailed beasts, binding their necks. The light purple chain seemed to be the natural enemy of the tailed beasts, as they could not be broken by brute force. Even if the nine-tailed beasts instinctively struggled, it was to no avail. Relying on his powerful dynamic capture ability, Dustless clearly saw that the bijou were controlled by the black iron rod. Squinting his eyes, Dustless carefully looked at Obito. Naruto and Sasuke naturally ignored him. These two brats always had some indescribable romantic sparks. Staring at Obito, Dustless's face became cold, and his eyes shot out a cold light. Yasukani no Magatama. With a wave of his hand, countless golden flashes roared out. Today, Dustless's control of the glint fruit and his understanding of all aspects has reached the peak level. Even because he used the glint fruit's ability to the fullest, he showed signs of reaching the next level. This jutsu, the boundless energy tide, was huge, and in the blink of an eye, it swept to Obito's side. Each golden light bullet was extremely extraordinary, and its penetrating power could easily crush a human body. Rinnegan's eyes flashed with a cold light. Obito hugged the sky with both hands, and boundless repulsion broke out from his body. Super Shinra Tensei. Boom boom boom, the tyrannical repulsion spread out, and the golden bullets in the sky were suddenly bounced away. However, a small number of golden bullets broke through the defense of the airwaves, but the effect was minimal. They just hit the ground like a sieve. Under the mask, Obito's eyes shifted, and contempt flashed in his eyes. He no longer stared at Naruto and Sasuke. Someone more dangerous than these two has appeared. Using such an inferior jutsu for a sneak attack is really disappointing. The masked man turned his head and said indifferently. His eyes were full of Rinnegan, and he controlled the Geto Mazo and the bijou. He indeed had the capital to despise Dustless. Sneak attack. Hearing this, Dustless's mouth curled into a playful smile, curled his lips, and said disdainfully, "Obito, you're still stupid. I just said hello to you, and you said it was a sneak attack. You've been with me for more than 10 years, and you're still as stupid as ever." A cold voice resounded, and Dustless's right eye changed sharply, and the blue eye became clear. Are you kidding me? How can he have that kind of eye? Hidden in the dark, Black Setsu's pupils dilated. For the first time in 1,000 years, ripples appeared in his heart, splashing with monstrous waves. The expression in his eyes changed rapidly. He subconsciously looked at the moon's direction, with a puzzled face. Staring at Obito who was standing on top of the Geto-Mazo's head, Kuroto didn't care about Obito's puzzled look. He raised his hands and sent out a chakra fluctuation. Boom! With a wave of his hand, the air rippled, and Obito, who was standing steadily, was sent flying out of thin air, leaving a trail of blood in the air. Boom! Obito, who was sent flying, smashed a deep hole in the ground. Even the mask on his face was easily broken, revealing his true face. He looked neither fish nor fowl, and there was a clear gap between the skin on both sides of his body. How do you know that I'm Uchiha Obito? Wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, Obito asked in a hoarse voice, but looking at the tailed beast bound by the Geto-Mazo, the doubt in his eyes was quickly replaced by murderous intent. Are you the masked man? Obito's face was pale, and his eyes were replaced by a cold light in an instant. In this way, Dustless's knowledge of his identity can be solved. But it's not a big deal. I'll take this opportunity to deal with you, and that person. Brushing the dust off his body, Obito didn't hide his identity. As long as he becomes the Jubi's Jinchuriki, everything will be over. He put his palms together, and a black sphere floated in the sky. Chibaku Tensei. The ground exploded with a bang, as if it was made of paper, unable to withstand a single blow. Looking around, the mountains were exploding and the earth was sinking. Everything ignored the existence of the law of gravity and was bound by the powerful gravitational force in the sky, swaying and drifting into the sky. Gravity is the word. Everything in the world is affected by the control of gravity. Even light can't escape the shackles of gravity. Obito's voice was as dull as thunder, and his tone was full of confidence. As his voice fell, the gravity of the black sphere in the sky became even greater, and it crazily swallowed the mountain fragments that were rushing towards it. Obito, who thought that he could deal with Dustless, relaxed a little, and breathed a sigh of relief. However, the next scene made Obito's face pale, and the corners of his mouth twitched without a trace, and there was some blood in the depths of his eyes, and he couldn't wait to erase the smile on his face forever. Under the gravitational force of Chibaku Tensei, Dustless stood in the same place, looking calm, and touching his chin with one hand. Insignificant skill, with your half-baked Chibaku Tensei, you want to make a cage to restrain me? Completely ignoring the gravitational force that enveloped his body, Dustless sneered. Obito and he were not in the same dimension, and the launched Chibaku Tensei naturally couldn't imprison him. Don't look down on people too much. People have self-esteem, and now Obito was directly slapped in the face by Dustless, and he couldn't help but be angry. He now has the Rinnegan and can control the nine-tailed beasts, but Dustless again and again, as if he didn't exist. How can Obito not be angry? Staring at Dustless, Obito's heart simply stopped, and the majestic meteorite in the sky stopped growing, but fell like a meteor. The target was naturally Dustless. Chapter 358. Dustless raised his eyelids and calmly stared at the falling meteorite. He shook his head slightly, and after giving Obito a hopeless look, he casually closed his eyes and simply ignored the falling meteorite. His thin figure was particularly unbearable under the meteorite. He couldn't even be regarded as an ant. Boring. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Dustless's chakra began to erupt. A golden shadow was reflected on the ground, a looming ferocious armor reflected on the ground, a mighty and extraordinary giant with a long sword in his hand, and an ancient aura suddenly descended. Whoosh boom boom boom, a huge slash whizzed out, the awe-inspiring light penetrated the void, stirring up a huge ripple, and an invisible airwave spread out, annihilating everything. and countless meteorite fragments were peeled off. Looking up, there was a sharp crack on the huge round meteorite. The cut was straight and smooth, and it seemed like it could cut everything, dividing the endless meteorite into two. Yasekani no Magatama. Boom boom boom, thousands of rays of light rose from the ground, like a meteor shower. The two huge meteorites were immediately turned into a sieve, and turned into a meteorite rain sprinkled on the ground. Buzz buzz buzz, just at this time, a muffled sound accompanied by a strong vibration spread out. Looking back leisurely, what entered everyone's eyes was the nine-tailed beasts working together to create an unprecedentedly huge Bijadama. The unprecedented Bijadama could destroy the world. In a trance, Dustless even saw a monster with 10 tails. Bijadama used by nine-tailed beasts. Even if it's not as good as the Jubi, its power can't be underestimated. Seeing this, Dustless's body Kansusanu dissipated. Such a big body was just a live target. His left eye rippled violently, and suddenly changed. With purple as the base, black lines spread out, and 9 mysterious black Magatama hung on the coil. It was Dustless's Rinnegan Sharingan. Casually condensing Bijadama, you don't care about me at all. In this case, I won't be polite. The focus of the left eye was the expanding Bijadama. Dustless's body rippled, and the Rinnegan Sharingan was restrained. The 9 mysterious black Magatama also trembled, splashing mysterious ripples. Mahabharata. Boom. Boom boom boom. Suddenly, a strange shockwave burst out without any warning, and the range of the shockwave was unprecedentedly large. It swallowed all 9-tailed beasts, and the Bijadama that they had painstakingly spent half a day on was also destroyed by this inexplicable shockwave. The tailed beasts were also easily flung away like ants. They were lying on the ground motionlessly, struggling at death's door. This was under the condition that Dustless deliberately went easy on them. Otherwise, the result could be imagined. Fragile. His left eye was the Rinnegan Sharingan, and his right eye was the Tensegan. At this moment, Wuchen gave people a feeling that he was particularly depressed and frightened. His whole body was surrounded by a cold aura that was isolated from the world. Even Obito was sweating, and the suffocating pressure almost made him collapse. Although I don't know where he got these eyes, the situation doesn't seem good. Black Zetsu, who was watching the battle in the dark, felt his heart tighten. The origin of Dustless's eyes was no longer important at this moment. Instead of worrying about this, it was better to worry about the ownership of the Jubi. Whether Uchiha Madara can get the Jubi or not, this question seems to be a bit uncertain. Not good, he ignored us. From behind, the huge chakra wave rolled over. Looking up, it was Sasuke and Naruto, who was covered by the golden flash. The purple light covered the sky and the earth, covering the endless void. Uzumaki Naruto's young attribute Kyubi chakra, and Sasuke's Kansusanu. This appearance is wrong. Turning around, Dustless smiled, and what he saw was the combination of Kyubi and Kansusanu. The long sword in Kyubi's hand was mighty and extraordinary. The majestic and invincible aura spread out, coupled with the body that was stronger than a mountain. If the opponent was anyone else, they would be scared and run away without a fight. An excellent target. Dustless just smiled indifferently, shrugged lazily, and hooked his finger towards Sasuke and Naruto, motioning them to come at him. This casual look was the biggest contempt. Whether it was Sasuke or Naruto, they both frowned, and a touch of anger rose in their hearts. Even if you look down on people, you should stop. Sasuke and Naruto have now merged and transformed, and their strength has a dimensional nature. It was completely different from before, and there was an essential difference. Good opportunity. Seeing that Dustless's attention was attracted by Naruto and Sasuke, Obito's eyes lit up, and he jumped on top of the Geto Mazo's head again. Useless trash, what's the use of having you? Dustless can't even deal with Uchiha. Originally, I wanted to delay the resurrection of Jubi for a while, but since your performance is so unsatisfactory, I can only resurrect Jubi ahead of time." Obito was full of anger. He thought that by gathering the power of Kyubi, he could deal with Dustless, but he didn't expect to be killed by Dustless's strange Rinnegan. It was really frustrating. "Get in here now." With Obito's violent roar, the Geto Mazo under his feet moved like the wind, opened its big mouth, and directly pulled the nine-tailed beasts over. Gulp! Under everyone's surprised gaze, the Geto Mazo directly swallowed the nine-tailed beasts, and a dazzling brilliance suddenly swept out of its body. The chakra wave that was dozens of times more violent than the nine-tailed beasts erupted from the Geto Mazo. The unprecedented throbbing made even Dustless stunned. Looking back, what caught his eyes was a monster with 10 tails. Chapter 359. Its huge body was boundless, filling the entire human eyeball. Its 10 tails swayed with the wind, and its back was covered with sharp thorn-like spikes. The blood-red eyes were particularly ferocious and terrifying, and circles of black ripples were clearly visible. The only difference was that perhaps it lacked the Kyubi's yang chakra, and it was just a simple 6 tomo. The monster's mouth had saliva like saliva, which was particularly disgusting. Even Dustless couldn't help but feel nauseous. He secretly compared the goddess of Uno with the Jubi in front of him, and his expression couldn't help but stiffen. Especially the saliva that fell from the Jubi's mouth made Dustless feel disgusted. Ouch! The angry roar resounded through the sky, and the roaring sound made even Dustless dizzy. The violent chakra produced a hurricane that made people feel like they were living in the eye of a tornado, and their hearts were full of despair. Not to mention fighting with this exaggerated monster in front of them, they didn't even have the heart to resist. The boundless chakra spread out like a tide, and even the land hundreds of kilometers away from the battle could feel this terrible chakra wave. The Jubi was a combination of chakra, the origin of all things in the world, and the sound it made was naturally not comparable to ordinary tailed beasts. The difference between the Kyubi and the Jubi was only one tail, but in fact, it was a world of difference. Dozens of Kyubi together couldn't cause any damage to the Jubi. After all, the Jubi was immortal. "It's over," Obito, who was on the back of the Jubi, said indifferently. His eyes were as quiet as stagnant water, and he looked at Dustless, Sasuke, and Naruto with indifference. The deep and emotionless Samsara eyes could see the three of them dead. At the same time, a conduit sprang out of the Jubi's body, connecting it and Obito's body tightly together. Obito's control of the Jubi seemed to have improved, and the roaring Jubi under his feet also quieted down, quietly swaying its 10 thick tails. "It's just the initial form of the Jubi. It gave you so much confidence, Obito." With a thick sneer on his handsome face, Dustless looked at Obito with a smile. As for the Jubi under his feet, Dustless simply ignored it. "You don't know what death is." Raising his eyelids, Obito glanced at Dustless with pity, and said indifferently, "Since you want to die so much, I'll fulfill your wish." It's no wonder that Obito is so confident. This world is actually a world of chakra. Whoever has more chakra will have a higher chance of winning. The Jubi under his feet is a collection of chakra, the source of everything. Go to hell. After saying that, the Jubi opened its big mouth full of fangs, and high-density dark chakra gushed out from its chest cavity, and the condensed sphere grew from small to big, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a huge Bijidama. What an amazing guy! With an emerald luster, Dustless did not hesitate to enter the chakra mode of the Tensigen. After all, the opponent is the Jubi, not some random cat or dog, so he must treat it with caution. "Take your Bijubi and go to hell to repent." Dustless shook his arm gently, and several green beads behind him floated in front of him, and in the blink of an eye, they liquefied and turned into a dirty light beam condensed in the palm of his hand. Golden Will Reincarnation Explosion. Raising his glossy arm, he swept down, and the golden light beam also stretched out without limit, turning into a golden light sword that stretched for more than 10 kilometers, mercilessly slashing towards the Jubi and the Jubi. Although the light beam didn't have a blade, no one dared to underestimate him. Poochie! The golden light whistled down, and the giant black Bijubi was penetrated by the golden light, and some cracks appeared in the middle, but obviously, the Jubi's Bijubi was extraordinary, and it didn't explode as expected. But there were many flaws and cracks, and as the Jubi's chakra continued to erupt, in less than a second, the previous gap was repaired, and the Jubi's Bijubi continued to grow. Not bad at all. Seeing this, Dustless was not angry, but happy. The Jubi was completely different from other tailed beasts, and there was no comparison at all. Whoosh! At the same time, the Bijadama of the 10-tailed beast was also condensed and thrown out with all its strength. The black energy ball rolled over, but Wuchen just turned into elements with a frivolous expression. The sky was so dark that it was almost crushed by the tailed beast, but the pulsating golden light was particularly clear. Unlike the light of dawn, this golden beam of light symbolized an even greater calamity. Boom! 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 A huge flame swept across the void, and the blazing impact with high temperature swept every inch of the sky, annihilating everything, and the drifting clouds were also inevitably swallowed. Has he been killed? Seeing the unusually clean sky, Obito's face was full of hope and desire. Dustless was a nightmare for him, and this kind of shadow could never be wiped away, and only by completely killing him would he be able to calm down. Living under the same sky as Dustless was a kind of torture for Obito. The ideal was beautiful, but the reality was extremely cruel. In the endless void, a golden flash swept across, and countless light particles gathered from all directions, and the light turned from nothingness to reality, and a thin figure suddenly appeared in the void. As expected of the Jubi. But I am very curious about a question. As the voice fell, Dustless's body disappeared again, as if he had never appeared, and only a playful and lazy voice lingered in the sky. Facing such a peerless and unparalleled speed, Obito could only smile bitterly. Even with the existence of the Jubi, his passive situation did not change. Jubi, you are so powerful. Have you ever been kicked by a light beam? Chapter 360. A ghostly voice sounded without warning. Obito was stunned, and his face immediately turned ugly. Dustless's biggest highlight was not his mysterious ninjutsu. Its greatest advantage was its lightning-like speed. It came and went without a trace, like a dragon whose tail could not be seen. Every time Dustless turned into a beam of light and began to act shamelessly, it also meant that the person he attacked was about to be eliminated. This inevitable truth was the result of many battles with Dustless. When Dustless's body was covered in golden light, it meant that it was time for game over. Yo, this look is quite scary. The beam of light converged in front of the Jubi's pupils. Dustless looked at the monster in front of him with a cheeky smile, looking straight at the scarlet eyes of the Jubi. His right leg shone brightly and was swallowed by the bright golden light. This is my return gift, Jubi. Lightspeed kick. Unlike the previous close physical contact, this time it was just a straight ray of light that shot out from Dustless's foot. The light went straight into the eyes of the Jubi. Dustless would not be merciful. The Jubi was an immortal super existence, and the dramatic scene of its soul being shattered by a kick would not happen. The dazzling light came ruthlessly, and the Jubi instinctively blocked in front of its eyes with its rough big hands. No matter what creature it was, the eyes were its most vulnerable part. Boom boom boom. A woof, the giant beast's movement instincts did not change, and the cumbersome Jubi was not good at moving. Its jerky movements could not keep up with the speed of light. The blade-like luster directly burned the blood-red eyes of the Jubi. The painful roar exploded, and the angry roar shook the sky. Bang bang bang, the Jubi seemed to have gone berserk as it hammered the ground crazily. The violent vibration spread out, and the land dozens of kilometers away could easily feel a towering resentment. A woof, the big mouth opened, and a strong wave of air erupted. The wind was full of wind, and the mountain in the distance directly cracked. The earth shattered like a spider web. This was the essence of the Jubi. His existence was destruction. Even the slightest movement would create an incomparable sound. Things would be annihilated along with his venting of hatred. If you want to hate, hate that you don't know, armament hockey. Dustless, who was bathed in the storm, looked calm, and stood with his hands behind his back. He looked at the Jubi's big mouth full of fangs, and his eyes were full of schadenfreude. Only the strange power of hockey could touch the elementalization and capture the body of the Logia ability user. He straightened his thumb, and golden light gathered at the tip. He was aiming at the depths of the tentail's mouth. Laser. Against the strong wind and waves, the golden light swept past and pierced towards the tentail's mouth with all its might. However, it was obvious that the Jubi was much smarter this time. It used its rough arm to block in advance and perfectly resisted the erosion of the light. Only a small burn wound was left on its arm. Combined with its huge body, the wound was not worth mentioning. In particular, it healed the next second after being injured. Its recovery ability was much more abnormal than Hashirama's. Creak. Creak, the sawtooth full of fangs clenched slightly, making a strange sound that made people's scalp numb and shudder. It was not difficult to see from the slightly raised mouth of the Jubi that it was extremely proud at this moment. It was smiling at Dustless, even though it looked a bit strange. It seemed to be silently mocking Dustless for overestimating himself. "Ah! I'm actually being looked down upon by a beast. This posture seems to be despising and looking down on me." Looking with interest at the Jubi who seemed to be showing off, Dustless's eyes flashed with a hidden chill. He suddenly realized that he was indeed a little mischievous before. Moves such as Lightspeed Kick and Laser were powerful, but if he wanted to cause damage to the Jubi who had an incredible recovery ability, it was still somewhat insufficient. "Humph, damn boy, I hope you won't be torn to pieces by the beast in your mouth. Good luck." Black Setsu, who was carefully observing the center of the battlefield, was angry, and his face was twitching. Dustless called the Jubi a beast. How could he not be angry? For him, this was more uncomfortable than eating 10 pounds of flies. It was simply a direct slap in the face. Black Setsu was also created by Huiji, so Dustless was indirectly scolding Black Setsu by pointing at his nose. Roar, the insignificant ant in front of him provoked him time and time again. The Jubi could no longer suppress his anger. Now he had no consciousness and wisdom, but he was completely following his instincts. The nerves that were reflected in his mind were telling him to completely erase Wu Qin. Jotian's thick arms suddenly raised, covering the sky and the earth. The originally clear sky was covered by a dark shadow, revealing sharp claws that were as sharp as blades, sweeping towards Dustless. The cold light on the claws could penetrate everything. Dustless was uncharacteristically calm. He calmly stared at the approaching claws. Instead, his body erupted with golden chakra. Obviously, Dustless did not intend to use the elemental transformation to escape from the Jubi's attack. The elemental transformation was only a passive defense. If he wanted to defeat the Jubi, he still needed to suppress it with absolute strength. Blindly running away was useless. The Jubi would not bow down to Dustless just because he could ignore and be immune to physical attacks. If he wanted to tame this unruly super monster, he must show absolute strength. As for illusion, Dustless was really not good at it. The golden chakra that was so dense that it was solid continued to erupt and surge. It quickly condensed into a giant that was hundreds of feet high, was exposed to the sun in the blink of an eye. Chapter 361. Dustless continued to spew chakra unscrupulously, and naturally, the height of the golden giant also continued to increase, and the sturdy heavy armor became deeper and stronger, and the 100-meter-tall body was not proportional to the jubi. However, this was just the beginning. Senjutsu, the special chakra that contained the aura of nature, gushed out, and the complete Kensusunoo also quietly changed. Mysterious runes poured into the Kensusunoo's body like a gem and laid on it. In an instant, the complete Kensusunoo's height erupted by dozens of feet. This is impossible. How can there be such an exaggerated Kensusunoo? Obito on the back of the jubi was in disbelief, and his eyes subconsciously swept towards the distant sky. Uchiha Madara's famous unique skill, Kensusunoo, was only more than 100 meters high. The exaggerated chakra in front of him had an incredible height of 50 or 60 feet, which is nearly 200 meters in height. I have said many times, my eye power is not comparable to Uchiha Madara's. Ninjutsu has no limit, the user is strong, and the technique used is also so. Looking down at Obito, Dustless explained in a matter-of-fact tone. He has the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, and in addition, he has the Tenseigan and Rinsei Sharingan. If his eye power is not comparable to Uchiha Madara's, it is better to find a place where there is no one and commit suicide as soon as possible. Puchi. There was a ripple in the air, and the complete Kensusunoo's chakra fell, and the sharp white light cut through the thorns and easily passed through the strong arm of the jubi. Boom! Thick smoke and dust splashed on the ground, and the arm full of sharp barbs fell to the ground, smashing a deep pit. Looking up, the left arm of the jubi was broken. There is no doubt that the arm on the ground is the broken arm of the jubi. Unbelievable, someone actually managed to cut off the 10-tailed beast's arm. Staring at the severed arm on the ground, Obito's expression inevitably became gloomy. The body of the jubi is undoubtedly the toughest existence in the world, but now it was cut off so easily by Dustless. How could he not be surprised? After a brief moment of surprise, Obito regained his indifference, and he was not worried about the jubi's predicament after losing an arm. Goo goo! Suddenly, the sound of squirming could be heard. An exuberant life force came from the front. The boundless life force gave people the absurd feeling of breaking out of a cocoon and turning something rotten into something magical. Dustless was slightly startled. He subconsciously looked at the left arm of the Ten-Tails, and a touch of emotion flashed in his eyes. It shouldn't be possible. Thinking of a certain possibility, Dustless's pupils also widened as he stared at the broken arm of Jubi in disbelief. As Jubi suddenly exerted force, it grew back exactly the same as before. It seems that it is still a little uncomfortable with the new arm. The Jubi moved its arm instinctively, and then roared at Dustless. Inexorably, Wuchen seemed to understand the beast language of the Arabian Nights. The unprepossessing Ten-Tails in front of him was demonstrating to him. No wonder this guy can only be sealed and can't be completely killed, Dustless murmured to himself. He suddenly remembered that Uchiha Madara was pierced by the Hashiman Kai in the later stage, and he also relied on the power of the Jubi in his body to regrow his limbs. It is no wonder that Otsutsuki Hagoromo and Otsutsuki Himura could only seal him and couldn't kill him. But the so-called Jubi is just a so-so. Next is the time to tame you. In the golden complete body of Kensusunoo, Dustless said as he looked down at the Jubi below, and his eyes flashed with a fiery color of possession. In the face of such a great temptation, no one can be indifferent, and Dustless is no exception. Becoming the Jubi's Jinchuriki means to take everything from him. If I don't teach you a lesson, I'm afraid you won't give up. Staring at the hysterical Jubi, Dustless's face outlined an evil charming smile, and with a slight thought, the complete body Susanoo containing the Senjutsu also began to move like a thunderbolt. Countless golden particles swarmed and gathered in the palm of Kensusunoo, and the dazzling brilliance shrouded the entire body of the Jubi. Obito saw this and was about to take the Jubi back into his body, but the golden particles all over the sky tilted down, and the cold sound resounded through the sky. Whether it was the number or the scale, it was much larger than the Yasukani no Magatama. Senjutsu Kensusanut Yasukani no Magatama. The golden afterglow tilted down, almost filling the entire void, and the whole world turned golden in an instant, and the vast earth was the target of this golden light. Gulp. Obito's face twitched fiercely, and the void in front of his chest splashed a faint ripple, slowly expanding and extending, and swallowing his whole body into a different space. Only the Jubi was left alone, suffering from the destruction, and became the target of oppression. Anyway, Obito has already controlled the Jubi, and especially the Jubi's immortal body. Any injury can be repaired. But Obito can't, so naturally, he has to find a place to take refuge. Pucci. In just a few minutes, the Jubi was like a fish on a chopping board. It was completely nailed and couldn't run away. It was attacked by the golden light bullets and its huge body became a live target. It was covered in bruises and it was a horrible sight to behold. However, in the blink of an eye, the Jubi's powerful recovery ability repaired it again. Ow ow ow. Woo woo woo, but even so, the Jubi wailed in pain. Injuries could be healed, but the piercing pain of being sliced into thousands of pieces couldn't be eliminated. The mental blow was unparalleled. Chapter 362. All living creatures can feel pain. The Jubi was brutally cut into pieces by Dustless. No matter how strong the body's recovery ability was, it still felt a piercing pain. Ao. In the end, a strong energy wave erupted. The Jubi tried to blow away the light bullets with all its strength, but it did achieve an unexpected result. The vibration that contained chakra annihilated many of the light bullets. Seeing this, the Jubi raised its huge mouth full of fangs again. It seemed to be looking at Dustless proudly. The strange sound of the dense fangs biting together made people shudder. However, the Jubi did not have long to feel proud. A golden light whistled down and cruelly suppressed it again. Its thorny back had a long and narrow crimson mark. Looking up, it was the Tachi of light in the hands of the complete form Kansusanu. It was obviously stained with a blood-like liquid. It's too early to be complacent. Dustless in the complete form Kansusanu said indifferently. He withdrew the long sword from its sheath and silently watched Obito, who once again appeared through the void. His face was full of ridicule and disdain. Not long after, the crimson blood stains of the Jubi healed again. It was not difficult to see how abnormal its recovery ability was. It's fine as long as you obediently stay in the different space. I didn't expect you to come out so recklessly. Looking at Obito indifferently, Dustless's expression changed quietly. The world in his eyes was completely looking at Obito as if he was looking at a dead man. Ao. It seemed to be aware that Dustless treated it like air. The Jubi, who was not calm, immediately looked up to the sky in grief. At the same time, a huge dark energy ball condensed in its mouth. Divine Art, Bright God Gate. Above the void, red circular trees raged down. The number was dense like raindrops. Looking up, it almost covered the entire sky. Wood style was the natural enemy of tailed beasts, and the Jubi was no exception. Boom boom boom, the slow and clumsy Jubi became the target of the red divine trees. It was suppressed and could not move. The Bijadama in its mouth also broke. Bang bang bang, naturally, the Jubi was not willing to be restrained like this. It struggled with all its might, and the majestic chakra broke out of its body. 10 strong and powerful tails hammered the ground as if venting its anger. Caw caw caw, the power of the tailed beasts was unfathomable, and the power of the 10 tails was even more so. The ravaged ground burst open, and the long and narrow cracks swallowed the ground, extending into the distance without limit. In just a few breaths of time, a bottomless pit had formed on the ground. The Jubi also inevitably fell into it. I've spun a cocoon around myself, with a sneer, Dustless stood indifferently and stared at the jubi that had fallen into the pit expressionlessly. Sure enough, the pure state of the tentails is not easy to control, and it can't concentrate its power. It's just like a beast without consciousness, relying on its instincts to attack the target. Staring at Dustless, Abito secretly thought. The jubi's previous attack could be said to be extremely awe-inspiring, but it was also due to the wild state of self-venting as it wished, without any active conscious control. In that case, let me become the second jubi's Jinchuriki after the 6 paths Sennin. Abito's breath tightened, and his rinnegan swayed with strong ripples, and his whole body seemed to have turned into a bottomless universe black hole in an instant. 6 paths Jubi seal. As Abito's roar fell, the jubi's movement suddenly stiffened, and then a burst of white smoke rose from the jubi's body. The huge jubi disappeared out of thin air, and Uchiha Obito underwent an amazing change. His skin turned pale, and 9 black spheres floated behind him. He held a dark staff in his hand, and there were several black tomo on his chest. Compared to the previous jubi's aura, it was obviously quiet now, and the aura was restrained, and there was no abnormality at all. However, if one perceives it carefully, they will notice that the oppression from Obito's whole body is much more terrifying than the previous wild state of the jubi. After all, the jubi is a pure beast that only knows how to vent its anger. It acts according to its instincts. Becoming a Jinchuriki means that the unconscious jubi will become conscious, and his consciousness is equivalent to the current Obito. Is this the jubi's Jinchuriki? Dustless's pupils narrowed, and at the same time, the corner of his mouth raised a sinister smile. The state of the jubi can be divided into 4 states, and the previous state is just the most primitive state. Even in the first state, the strength of the jubi is earth-shattering, and now Obito is so eager to devour the jubi, he will inevitably suffer a backlash. It is also the best time for Dustless to recapture the jubi. Bastard! As if to confirm Dustless's conjecture, Obito, who had swallowed the jubi, screamed in pain with a splitting headache, and the quiet power in his body began to go crazy, and the rich chakra spread like the autumn wind sweeping the fallen leaves. Obito's eyes turned scarlet, and his eyes were filled with dense blood like a spider web. He was gasping for breath, and his face was pale, and he looked desperate. Why struggle like this? It's better to let go of hell and meet Rin Noera, and I will help you, Obito. With a gloomy smile, Dustless's eyes were particularly strange, and the faint voice seemed to be full of endless magic, making Obito's movements stiff. His consciousness was devoured by the jubi, and he once again recovered and looked at Dustless blankly. Don't you want to know how Rin Noera died? I will tell you the truth of the matter. The person behind the scenes who manipulated Rin Nohara's death is actually me. Chapter 363. Obito strongly suppressed the throbbing in his heart and tried to maintain the rationality in his mind. He stared at Dustless's strange eyes, and his heart suddenly thumped. Could it be? In his mind, he suddenly remembered the life and death process of Rin Noera that day. Obito's heart was in his throat, his eyes were locked on Dustless's strange smile. Don't show such a surprised and fierce expression. Dustless couldn't stand Obito's fierce eyes. He shrugged frivolously and said in a casual tone, You and Rin Noera are the same, but both are chess pieces that I controlled back then. Even if Obito has now become the jubi's Jinchuriki, his nature as a chess piece has not changed. But Madara wanted to use this to suppress Dustless in the past. Rin Nohara's death was indeed caused by me. With a dark and strange smile, Dustless admitted it bluntly. He has been annoyed by Obito for so many years. If he can use the mouth to kill him, this is the result that Dustless would like to see. Sure enough, it's you. I will definitely tear you to pieces. Hearing this, Obito's eyes instantly turned scarlet. He gasped like an ox, his eyes were staring at Dustless, his killing intent was surging, especially when talking about Rin Nohara's life and death. Dustless's disdainful tone deeply stimulated him. Of course, this is also the result of Dustless's intention. This kid is now being swallowed by the Jubi. Maybe he will really become the Jubi's nourishment. At the beginning, I used my dojutsu to cause the tragedy of her death. All of this is the reason why you opened your mangekyo. I spent a lot of effort for this. You should be grateful to me, Obito. Spreading his arms, Dustless smiled disdainfully. Do you think it's helping you today? I'm telling you very clearly, everything you have today is given to you by me. You becoming the Jubi's Jinchuriki is also within my expectations. A calm and powerful voice resounded through the sky. Dustless mocked Obito coldly. He has a kind of disgust and hatred from the depths of his soul for Obito's arrogance over the years. This kid is obviously just a chess piece, but his expression of knowing everything made Dustless extremely uncomfortable, and he took this opportunity to vent his resentment. Although I don't know what happened, a scum like you should die early. A voice containing endless anger suddenly came, accompanied by a dazzling golden light. Looking up, it was Uzumaki Naruto falling from the sky. You don't know death. Seeing this, Dustless's eyes flashed with gloomy killing intent. At the same time, the Rinnegan Sharingan in his left eye rippled. The focus of his sight was the mid-air where Uzumaki Naruto was falling. A violent roar accompanied by a strong repulsion resounded through the sky. Mahabharaya. Boom. Without warning, the strange repulsive force burst out, and Naruto, who was holding the golden Rasengan, was swallowed by the airwave and was easily thrown out like a dead dog. However, this kid's vitality was strong, or his will was strong. In just a few breaths, he stood up again shakily. Although he gave people a feeling of fragility, he was unusually strong. His eyes were locked on Dustless, and there was no fear in his eyes. Good eyesight, worthy of Minato's son, you can survive the frontal attack of Mahabharaya. Seeing this, Dustless nodded with a smile. The principle of Mahabharaya was very simple. It was just to throw a repulsive force equivalent to Super Shinra Tensei into any place at will. There was no way to defend against it, and one could only be beaten passively. Naruto, this kid, was attacked by Super Shinra Tensei, but he could still stand up, which really impressed Dustless. Whoosh! The sound of air breaking came from the front. Looking up, he saw a black arrow whistling toward him. Amaterasu, frowning slightly, Dustless could see the essence of the black arrow at a glance. It was completely controlled by Amaterasu. The power of the arrow was self-evident. The moment it touched the arrow, it would turn into ashes. This is your choice, Sasuke. I was going to let you live for the sake of my brother, but it seems that you chose the direction of hell. Several green beads behind him floated in front of him, and a strong hurricane roared out. Silver Will Reincarnation Explosion. A strong hurricane came out from Dustless's hand, and the unparalleled wind directly covered the black arrow, like a stone thrown into the sea. Without the slightest ripple, it was completely eliminated. Suddenly, the purple evil light reflected in Dustless's pupils. Looking up, a purple giant with a height of 100 meters appeared out of thin air in front of him, wearing heavy armor and a ferocious Tengu helmet. Fragile. Both of them were Kansusuno perfect form, so it stands to reason that they should be about the same height, but Dustless looked at Uchiha Sasuke with a condescending gaze. Killing you will only take a blink of an eye, Sasuke. You will regret for stepping out of the gates of hell. His pupils suddenly widened, and the evil eye began to rage. Dustless's mouth raised a ferocious smile. Kansusuno once again unsheathed his katana of light, and the monstrous rainbow shrouded the earth, and the destructive slash whistled out. Boom! 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 The golden slash came head-on, and Sasuke's face was pale. The terrifying light was almost impossible to resist, and even Kansusuno perfect form would disintegrate instantly. After thinking for a while, Sasuke also chose to draw his sword to meet the enemy. Whoosh! The same huge purple slash whistled out, pulling a long and narrow gully on the ground, destroying the earth, and the invincible katana of light pierced through everything. However, what made everyone's eyes drop was that when the two slashes collided, the golden luster swallowed the purple light in a destructive manner, and went straight to the sluggish Sasuke. It was almost an overwhelming gesture that instantly killed Sasuke's slash. Chapter 364. The strength of Dustless and Sasuke is very different. The height of Kansusuno's perfect form explains everything. The two's eye power is completely different. After integrating Itachi's Mangekyo, your eye power is not worth mentioning. It's a waste of Itachi's eyes. Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan's eye power is not as good as mine, not to mention I also have Tensigen and Rinnegan Sharingan. Dustless in Kansusuno's perfect form shook his head and quietly looked at Sasuke, who was about to be swallowed by the chop. The gap between the two sides is too big. Even with Itachi's Mangekyo Sharingan, Sasuke's eye power is still not as good as Dustless's. Kacha! The golden luster passed through Kansusuno directly. With the sound of the explosion, Kansusuno, who claimed to have stepped into the realm of God, collapsed and was annihilated in an instant. Under absolute power, it was so vulnerable. Fortunately, Sasuke also had foresight. At the critical moment, he decisively abandoned Kansusuno's perfect form and avoided the fatal chop. Looking up, the 100-meter-tall giant chakra fell to the ground alone. The chakra in its hand was killed mercilessly before it could be sheathed. Its scarlet eyes shot a look of unwillingness, and it tried its best to heal the two halves of its body. Stubborn resistance. Wu Chen's indifferent pupils emitted a vicious aura, and said with killing intent. At the same time, Susanoo's hand once again fell, and an awe-inspiring slash once again cut through the sky. Kansusunoo, who fell to the ground, was annihilated and turned into dust. This guy, Wu Chen's cold eyes made everyone's spirits rise. They felt a chill all over their bodies. In the face of such a peerless god of death, only the dead and the legendary god could remain calm. Uzumaki Naruto. Kansusunoo, which was 500 or 600 meters tall, covered the sky and the earth, and the golden evil brilliance sprinkled over the earth like the sun, covering the sky and the sun, making everyone's heart fall to the bottom. Looking at the height of nearly 200 meters, no matter who it was, they couldn't resist. Dustless's cold eyes stared at Naruto, who refused to give up. He sneered and said, "From the beginning, I hated your savior mentality. You always think that others are wrong and you are right. You deny everything about others. This is very similar to Minato. How boring. You're just a clown living in my script. How dare you talk about your dreams so shamelessly? I don't remember giving you the right to do that." Looking down at Obito, Naruto, and Sasuke, Dustless's cold tone. "No one is a clown in your script, no is a puppet in your script. Is it, teacher?" In a trance, Obito saw the shadow of Namikaze Minato from Naruto's body. His heart rippled, and his eyes changed dramatically. The thoughts in his mind became firmer. "Traitor, you are indeed a useless piece of trash. Choosing you was a mistake." Dustless's eyes were filled with killing intent as he said coldly. Obito's expression changed, and he naturally saw it. Kansusunoo light gathered, and the dazzling light covered the entire earth. "Now, I'm going to clean up the sect." The diamond sword in Kansusunoo's hand became even more dazzling. The dazzling light was like the sun, making people unable to open their eyes. The dense destructive power that filled it made people feel powerless. Yasukani no Magatama. The flash whizzed out and turned into a luster that roared down. The number was overwhelming. Even an Iron Man like Naruto was stunned for a while, and he was desperate. "Both of you, come over here quickly." Seeing this, Obito quickly shouted and controlled the 9 Magatama behind him to form a black defensive wall to resist the erosion of the light bullets. Sasuke and Naruto looked at each other and ran to Obito's side. Whoosh! The light bullets fell mercilessly from the sky. The black barrier as thin as a cicada's wing covered the void. Its thickness was about the same as an ordinary leaf. Only God knows if it could withstand it. Don't worry, this defensive barrier is condensed by truth-seeking ball. It's fundamentally different from ordinary defensive barriers. Seeing both Naruto and Sasuke frowning with a worried look, Obito calmly explained. The enchantment formed by the truth-seeking ball is definitely the strongest. Boom. 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 Obito's conjecture was also confirmed. The rainstorm-like golden light bullets all smashed on the defensive barrier, but they couldn't break it. Sasuke and Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. I have something to entrust you. Entrust. The power of Bijou. You still have such an unrealistic and ridiculous idea in front of me, Obito. Behind Obito, shining photons came from all directions and condensed into Dustless's body. His eyes were cold, and he directly threw out a black iron rod. Whoosh! Hearing the sharp sound coming, Obito didn't dodge, and the truth-seeking ball behind him once again turned into a circular defensive barrier. Clang! Sparks flashed in the air, and the black iron rod that Dustless threw out was distorted and turned into useless scrap iron falling to the ground. It seems that becoming Jubi's Jinchuriki has made you a lot more confident. Seeing this, Dustless's pupils rippled. Looking at Obito's back, he said calmly. At the same time, golden light rose from his body again, and he disappeared. Lightspeed kick. Boom. Dustless's speed was too fast. Obito didn't have time to open his truth-seeking ball defense. He felt that his chest was attacked by a tyrannical and unparalleled force, and all the organs in his lungs were displaced. If he wasn't Jubi's Jinchuriki, I'm afraid that this casual kick would have won the battle. Even if he didn't die, Obito was still sent flying with a kick, and it seemed like he was completely crushed. Sasuke and Naruto, who didn't realize what happened, became lambs to the slaughter. Chapter 365. Obito was kicked on the spot without any power to fight back. Only Sasuke and Naruto were left in the same place. Sasuke looked at Uzumaki Naruto with his eagle-like eyes. He hated this little fox. Denying everything about others, always thinking that he is right, such a conceited person, no one will like him. The light gathered in his palm, and the golden long sword jumped with a sharp cold light. His eyes were filled with killing intent, and the sharp lightsaber was enough to cut a meteorite. Puchi! A scarlet bloodstain appeared in midair, and the stinging pain spread all over his body. Uzumaki Naruto instinctively stepped back and subconsciously touched his face full of wounds. There was a scorched wound on his face. Oh, your reaction is quite fast. Looking at Uzumaki Naruto with a smile, Dustless's face was full of ridicule, and he mocked, "It seems that after living with that fox for a long time, your survival habits have become like a human." Such a sensitive reaction ability should be classified as a beast. As if it was intentional, the sword wound on Naruto's right face was particularly conspicuous. Naruto, be careful of this guy, his strength is not in the same dimension as ours. Appearing beside Naruto in a flash, Sasuke cautiously said. At the same time, he didn't forget to guard against Dustless. When he attacked Naruto just now, he didn't even see the moment he raised his sword. All the movements were smooth and fleeting. When he realized it, it was already too late. If it weren't for Naruto's quick nerves, he might have died. I'll pay attention. Nodding heavily, Naruto's cross-eyed eyes were filled with depression. Sasuke didn't see Dustless make a move, and he was no exception. He felt the unprecedented danger and just instinctively stepped back. It was the first time he encountered such a terrifying enemy in his life. He's coming. Noticing Dustless's sudden disappearance, Sasuke suddenly screamed. Naruto, who was thinking quickly, also recovered. When he looked up, Dustless was already in front of him. The golden flash roared down, and the sharp golden light was about to split Uzumaki Naruto in two. Gotcha! Purple chakra suddenly rushed out and turned into a hard shield to resist Dustless's attack. The evil aura enveloped Sasuke and Naruto. Despite this, the purple chakra still had clear cracks. Kansusanu again, Dustless's eyes burst with cold light, and his fingertips straightened. The white golden luster gathered on his fingertips, and after a moment, he shot it with a cold face. Wu Chen is not a good person. The road is chosen by oneself. If Sasuke leaves wisely and stays away from the smoke, Wu Chen doesn't mind letting him go. Anyway, it doesn't matter if Sasuke dies or not. However, Sasuke now chose to enter the path of heaven. Naturally, Wu Chen incarnated as God to take his life. Whoosh! The light gathered on his fingertips shot out. It was cold and ruthless, containing Dustless's monstrous killing intent. It easily penetrated Sasuke's abdomen. The bloody hole was clearly visible, and the smell of burnt meat floated in the air. Through Sasuke's abdomen, the world on the other side could be seen. You can still stand, your perseverance can't be underestimated. Seeing Sasuke struggling with a bloody hole in his abdomen, like a javelin supporting his body, Dustless's calm eyes rippled, then he just sneered, and the huge beam roared out again. Puchi! It directly opened a bigger wound on his chest and occupied Sasuke's body. Looking at the big hole in his abdomen, Sasuke's pupils were gray and dim, and his face was pale, like a candle in the wind, dancing with the flowing wind. He could clearly perceive that his vitality was accelerating. Whoosh! Countless beams were thrown out, and the gorgeous light swallowed Sasuke's whole body. Only people with excellent dynamic ability could see that Sasuke's body was covered with dense burn holes, and it was horrible to look at. About a few breaths of time passed, the erosion of the light was over, revealing the ravaged body. Sasuke's whole body was burned, his face was unrecognizable, his breathing was stagnant, his heart stopped beating forever, and his gray eyes fell to the ground with unwillingness. Although your life aura no longer exists, in order to prevent some melodramatic resurrection event, I will be relieved if you disappear with your bones. Dustless, who planned to turn around and leave, suddenly remembered that for some reason, Sasuke finally met the old monster Rikudo Sennin in the spiritual world, and accepted his inheritance, obtained the power of Rikudo, and opened the legendary six-tomo Rinnegan. Dustless's fingertips burned with black flames, and he looked indifferently at Sasuke's burned body. He chose to directly destroy the body. Bastard, go and be buried with Sasuke. Seeing his friend was cut open by Dustless, Naruto's eyes were wide open. The energy ball containing nature's chakra in his hand hit Dustless's back with all his strength. Idiot! Dustless turned his head and glanced at Naruto casually. At the same time, his body swayed with an irresistible repulsion force, and Uzumaki Naruto was thrown out together with the Rasengan in his hand. A huge pit was smashed on the ground, and Uzumaki Naruto was lying in it half dead, half conscious. Kid with a strong vitality, feeling that Naruto was still weak, Dustless couldn't help but be moved by the vitality of the Uzumaki clan. Whether it was Nagato or Naruto, their vitality was extremely strong. Serves you right. With a thick sneer on his face, Dustless changed his face faster than flipping a book. Perhaps it was because of the unique chakra and the majestic vitality that it was the first choice to seal the bijou. Don't worry, after killing Sasuke, I will extract your bijou, and then send you two to the underworld to continue your fate. Chapter 366. The Rinnegan surged with ripples, and Madara stared helplessly at the figure in front of him, and a sense of frustration rose in his heart. This mysterious woman named Yuluo's strength is almost the same as mine. If it weren't for the Edo Tensei, I'm afraid I would be full of holes. The golden beam hit him head-on, and Madara's body was disintegrated into 8 pieces. In just a short time, his body was healed again. This is the biggest advantage of the Edo Tensei. As long as he is not attacked by the yin-yang release, he can recover without limit. During the fight, his body was blown up countless times, but he didn't take any advantage. Yuluo's strange pattern was something he had never seen before, and he could only rely on the advantage of the Edo Tensei to test it. Fortunately, after his body was blown up countless times, he finally had some understanding of the strange pattern in front of him. This woman is too strong, and it's impossible to defeat her in a short time. After some testing, Madara also came to this cruel fact. He had enough confidence to defeat Yuluo, but the time needed to be extended indefinitely. It could be 1 day, 2 days, or even longer. If you have any unrealistic ideas, I advise you to stop before you go too far. A cold voice came from the front, pulling Madara's thoughts back. Yuluo said sternly, "My Tenseigen is not weaker than your Rinnegan. The Tenseigen and the Rinnegan are of the same level. Perhaps the sealing aspect is not as good as the Rinnegan, but the pure physical attack is absolutely unparalleled. It's even better than the Rinnegan. The Tenseigen is indeed not inferior to the Rinnegan." Hearing this, Madara nodded seriously. From the battle just now, he has learned that the Tenseigen is the dojutsu inherited from Homura, the younger brother of the Rikudo Sennin. There is no reason for it to be weaker than the Rinnegan. Well, Obito has become the Jubi's Jinchuriki. Why deceive yourself? Maybe if you become the Jubi's Jinchuriki, you can suppress Dustless and Uchiha Obito. Compared to my man, he is 1,000 miles behind. Yuluo smiled. Her soft smile was like the warm sunshine in March. She has 100% confidence in Dustless. Even if Obito becomes the Jinchuriki of the Jubi, the strength he can exert is not to be underestimated. Useless trash. Uchiha Madara's eyes flashed with fire. Indeed, as Yuluo said, he observed Black Setsu in the dark and knew that Obito was at a disadvantage. As a Jinchuriki of the Jubi, he was beaten up by Dustless. It's really inexcusable. Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto were also beaten without any power to fight back. Sasuke was burned to ashes by Amaterasu, and Naruto was in a half-dead state. What made Madara feel the most powerless was that even if he went to support Obito, according to Dustless's current strength, he might be cruelly abused. Madara-sama, the situation is critical. That kid Obito was beaten by Uchiha Dustless without any power to fight back. In his mind, Black Setsu's anxious voice sounded. His hoarse tone was filled with endless anger. He cursed Obito for being useless. As the Jinchuriki of Jubi, he was defeated by Dustless. It was not justifiable from all sides. Even if it's because Dustless is too abnormal. Shut up, Black Setsu, don't communicate with me without my permission. With a murderous tone, Madara warned. Black Setsu was anxious, but he was more anxious than Black Setsu. Once Dustless captures the Jubi, it means that he may become the new Jinchuriki of the Jubi. At the same time, he couldn't help but feel a sense of regret. If he had listened to Black Jew's advice and killed Dustless directly, he wouldn't have been in such a terrible situation today. Everything was self-inflicted. If he didn't value Dustless's strength and wanted to use him, he wouldn't be like this. But having said that, it's impossible for him to admit his mistake in front of Black Setsu's consciousness. Now Dustless is unstoppable. When he becomes the Jubi's Jinchuriki, he will be even more invincible. Wherever his sword points, everything will be destroyed. Damn you, Uchiha Madara. Seeing Madara so arrogantly scolding him, Black Setsu's heart also became angry. Although he is now Madara's dog, Madara didn't dare to directly scold him before. Black Setsu is also the will of Otsutsuki Kagaya. His identity is noble. Being ordered around by Madara, grassroot, can't help but feel angry. Although he is unhappy, he still has to continue being a grandson. Although the battle with her made my blood boil, the current situation is dangerous. Only I can deal with Uchiha Dustless personally, and become a new Jinchuriki can compete with him. Madara's eyes flashed, and he secretly said coldly. No matter what the final development is, he must go and grab the Jubi to become the third Jinchuriki. Want to run away? Catching the intention of retreat in Madara's eyes, Yuluo's body shone brightly, and a bright beam of light mercilessly cut towards Madara. Run away. What a joke, your strength is almost the same as mine, but I am the Edo Tensei, this is my advantage. Hearing this, Madara sneered again and again. Although Yuluo can use Yin-Yang release, he can also use it. In the end, Yuluo doesn't have much advantage. Ignoring the beam of light, Madara's pupils widened, and the mysterious black ripples spread out. He stared at Yuluo's position, and opened his mouth to say his trump card. Will Grave, Border Prison. Boom! A strong repulsive force burst out, and even though Yuluo was prepared for the Will Grave, Border Prison, her body was still affected by the shock wave and bounced out. Seeing this, Madara also seized the opportunity, and his body quickly rushed towards the place where Uchiha Wuchin and Obito were fighting, leaving only the shadow summoned from the Tomb of Luin to deal with Uchiha Luo. Chapter 367. Uchiha Madara's anxiousness is understandable. After Wuchin got the Jubi, the only person who can suppress him is the legendary god. Even if Rikudo Sennin is perfectly resurrected, whether he can defeat Dustless is still a question mark. Obito, that useless trash. Black Zetsu couldn't help but curse Obito again. As the third son of Kagaya, he was ruthlessly reprimanded by Uchiha Madara, who was almost 1,000 years younger than him. If Obito can deal with Dustless, Black Zetsu won't have to endure Madara's anger. Inevitably, Black Zetsu blamed all of this on Obito. It's over, Uzumaki Naruto. Indifferently observing the fainted Naruto, Dustless's eyes flashed with naked disdain. He waved his hand and Chakra's energy wave hit Naruto's clothes. On his chest, a unique black vortex seal was revealed. It was the Bagua seal used to seal Kyuubi. The half-dead Naruto struggled to open his eyes and looked at the indifferent Dustless in a trance. He tried his best to speak, but due to the severe physical exhaustion, he couldn't open his mouth again after saying a word, and he fainted. He could only let Dustless move. Naruto could clearly feel that some special and strange energy wave was absorbing Kyuubi's yang attribute in his body. About half an hour later, Kyuubi's chakra was extracted. The golden monster with 9 tails was in the sky, casually raging chakra, staring at Dustless fiercely. The blood-red eyes glared at Dustless, and a monstrous hatred and blood smell came from it. If eyes could kill, Dustless would be a human stick at this moment. I'm the benefactor who liberated you from his body. Not only are you not grateful, but you hate me. Pointing at Naruto, who stopped breathing, Dustless looked at Kyuubi hopelessly. His eyes were abnormally magnanimous and righteous, as if he should kneel down and thank him. Seeing this, Kyuubi grimaced and snorted. Too lazy to waste his breath, he gathered a dark energy ball in his mouth. Go to hell with your ambition. The Baijidama grew bigger and bigger. In just a few breaths of time, the energy ball as big as a mountain filled the entire sky. The power contained within it could easily crush several mountains. Not to mention facing it head-on, even the slightest energy fluctuation would be blown away by the wind. Humans and beasts really cannot communicate. Dustless stared fearlessly at the Baijidama that was getting bigger and bigger. The corner of his mouth slightly raised, revealing a contemptuous smile. The attack style of the tailed beasts was extremely monotonous. Other than the Baijidama, it was direct physical combat. The other aspects of resistance were not worthy of compliments. This also meant that they were destined to be slaughtered by others. So, the Bijadama reached its limit, and a blade-like hurricane swept up. If one came into contact with it, they would be sliced into pieces. Although it was ferocious, Dustless directly ignored it. Whoosh! The sound of breaking air resounded, and various substances in the air began to be annihilated and collapsed. Looking from afar, the huge Bijadama was coming head-on, rolling up a fierce storm, and drawing a long and narrow trench on the ground. Dustless's eyes were filled with nothing but the huge Bijadama. The Bijadama with Kyubi's resentment was extraordinary, it could drag the whole world down with it. Genjutsu is ineffective against me, physical attacks are also ineffective against me. With a light smile, Dustless stood with his hands behind his back and closed his eyes indifferently. The Bijadama passed through his body and swept straight behind him. Boom boom boom, the atmosphere was dull for a long time. The Bijadama was sublimated, setting off an unprecedented explosion. The range of the explosion was vast and infinite, but it still couldn't affect Dustless. Ping ping ping, the earth shook violently in a regular pattern, strong and tyrannical power raged, the flowing air around him was filled with a faint dry heat. Slightly frowning, Dustless opened his eyes again, and what he saw was the orange monster that jumped into the air. Its developed muscles were tightly stretched, and its sharp claws were surrounded by a cold light that penetrated through all things in the world. It was about to separate Dustless's head from his body. Seeing this, Dustless just smiled, and then a ripple of energy floated out from the Rinnegan Sharingan. The invincible attack of Kyubi suddenly stiffened, and in a flash, it was full of flaws. It seemed that some special power delayed the movement of Kyubi, and the eyes full of hatred also underwent an amazing change. The scarlet eyes turned into circles of Rinnegan. Dustless just casually glanced at Kyubi and controlled it. Although I'm not very good at genjutsu, you rushed over so carelessly, you're a good target, Kyubi. Regardless of whether Kyubi could hear him or not, Dustless was just talking to himself. When he practiced with Sasuke in the system, Dustless took everything from Sasuke. Sasuke, who was gifted by Rikudo Sennin, opened the 6-tomo Rinnegan. In addition to the Heavenly Hand power, Genjutsu, there was also Genjutsu unique to Rinnegan. Dustless, who defeated Sasuke in the system, took everything from him, and naturally, he also knew the Heavenly Hand power, and the mysterious but powerful Genjutsu. On the other hand, Nine-Tailed, who had been so arrogant just a moment ago, was now lying on the ground obediently. The murderous aura around his body had also been retracted. His 9 tails gently slapped the ground, splashing up some dust. The 9-tailed beast in front of him gave off an absurd feeling as if it was possessed. It seemed to be begging for mercy from Dustless. I said before that I'll send you and Sasuke to meet in the underworld, and now I'll fulfill both of your wishes. Looking back at Uzumaki Naruto, Dustless said seriously. Naruto, who extracted the bijou, will definitely die, but for safety reasons, it's better to destroy the corpse. A black light suddenly flashed on Naruto's body, swallowing every inch of his skin. Chapter 368. Boom boom boom. Chakra boiled and surged, the invisible air waves repelled out, and the soil covering the body immediately turned into countless particles. In the deep pit, a pale body was exposed. Worthy of the Jubi's Jinchuriki, it's really a tough guy. Looking at the pale figure, Dustless said with a little helplessness and admiration. This is the Jubi's Jinchuriki, no matter what kind of injury it receives, it will recover. Even fatal injuries to normal humans will be healed in an instant. There is only one way to deal with the Jubi's Jinchuriki, and it's the only way Dustless knows. The only way is to extract the Jubi from Obito's body, there is no other way. The chakra of the two brats seems to have disappeared, it seems that they have been killed, the majestic perception spread out, taking in the wind and grass around him. Obito muttered to himself, and his heart fell to the bottom. He originally hoped that Sasuke and Naruto could help contain Dustless, but now it seems that the idea was aborted. The two were slaughtered by Dustless without leaving their bodies. Their end was extremely miserable. Whoosh! A dazzling luster suddenly flashed, and when he looked up, a beam of light as thick as a thumb hit his face. Insignificant skill. Obito didn't dodge, holding the six-path monk's staff in his hand, and a black defensive wall flashed out of thin air, as thin as a cicada's wing, but it gave an unshakable feeling. Clang! The defensive wall swept up a faint spark, and the golden light couldn't erode and penetrate it, leaving only a slight burn mark easily blocking the golden light. Not simple, your control of the truth-seeking ball is obviously on a higher level. Dustless slightly nodded, and golden light condensed on his fingers again. The 5 fingers were decorated with gorgeous brilliance, as bright as stars, and he casually flicked his fingers. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, the light that shot out from his fingertips exploded like a heavenly maiden scattering flowers, turning into raindrops that rushed towards Obito in an endless stream. Will grave, border prison. There was a ripple in the void, and the wave-like air waves swallowed everything around, and the light bullets in the sky were swallowed and scattered before they played the prelude to the destruction of the sun. Eyebrows slightly raised, Dustless's eyes swept to the northern sky, and a tiny black dot came into his eyes. It was Uchiha Madara. With Rinnegan, Madara's speed was naturally extremely fast, and after a while, his whole body hit the ground like a meteorite, splashing countless gravel. The ground where he landed also collapsed, revealing a large crater. Uchiha Madara held his hands in front of him and looked at Obito with indifferent eyes. He looked down at the incompetent Jinchuriki with a contemptuous attitude. Jinchuriki, as the Jubi's Jinchuriki. This bee is really good, bold and stylish enough. Seeing Madara's domineering appearance, his invincible aura shrouded everyone's heart. Wuchen secretly gave a thumbs up to Madara, and then a subtle sarcastic smile appeared on his face. The unparalleled aura seemed to be a silent declaration of Madara's high-profile entrance. Let's put aside the grievances between you and me for the time being, let's clean him up first. Looking at Madara casually, Obito said with confidence. His eyes flashed with ambition. Madara's Rinnegan and the Jubi were now his, and his identity as a pawn was not suitable for him. As you wish. Although he was not happy with Obito's arrogant tone, Madara also restrained his dissatisfaction. After killing Dustless, his biggest and strongest enemy, it would not be too late to talk about the ownership of the Jubi. Dustless is immune to physical attacks. I will hold him for a while, and you can release that technique. Looking deeply at Obito, Madara faintly said, and immediately stared at Dustless, ready to fight. The ground under his feet suddenly burst open, and thick arms formed by green bushes grabbed Madara's legs, and the strength was raised to the limit, and fiercely tore in different directions. Puchi! Caught off guard, Madara's Edo Tensei was directly torn in half, thrown away like garbage, and then pounced on Obito in the same way. However, the same trick obviously did not play the same effect. Looking contemptuously at the attacking Makugan, Obito waved his hand, and a black defensive wall surrounded him. The sticky Makugan directly collapsed and decayed. He is not a fish in a pond, and if you underestimate him, you will end up like this. Glancing indifferently at the restored body of Madara, Obito seriously explained. This is the result of underestimating Dustless. Well, I'm just testing how much he has improved over the years. With a snort, Madara brushed the dust off his body. He was cunning and naturally heard Obito's sarcasm, and he also chose to look at him coldly. So, did you test the strength of this guy? Turning his head and glancing at Madara, Obito calmly asked. Of course, I tested his strength. Although I don't want to admit it, but now he is not inferior to the former Hagoromo. His eyes gloomy, Madara clenched his fist and said in a hoarse and low voice, I can only use that technique, otherwise, you and I will definitely not last long." After that, Madara rushed out, and with a ferocious face, he rushed toward Dustless. "I also want to see how different you are from the only one who opened the Rinnegan in a millennium." Boom! 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 Light gathered in his hand, and Dustless fought with Madara. The roar of the sword's collision resounded, and each time, it was accompanied by violent fluctuations of energy. Even the simplest confrontation of taijutsu caused the mountains to collapse and the earth to crack. Suddenly, the earth suddenly trembled, and the thick green trees pierced the sky, and the huge mysterious bud at the top was clearly visible. Chapter 369. The thick green tree extended without limit and turned into an unprecedented tree demon. In the blink of an eye, it reached a height of hundreds of meters. Dustless's complete body Kansusanu was not worth mentioning compared to this tree. Boom! Dustless couldn't help but choke. Although he had imagined the true appearance of the tree countless times in his mind, he still couldn't help but gasp when he saw such an exaggerated degree. Kaguya just stole the power of the tree. What kind of material the tree was made of is still a mystery. There's no need to show such an incredible look. Madara slightly moved his muscles and bones, and there was a crackling sound of bones. He explained at length, the source of chakra is actually the tree of God. The first person who obtained the power of chakra was Kaguya, the mother of the sage of 6 paths. Besides that, Madara. Seeing Madara open his mouth, Dustless's eyes flashed with a sarcastic smile, and directly interrupted his speech. "You think you know everything, playing with the world like a doll. Unfortunately, have you ever thought that you are actually all things in the hands of others? In the final analysis, Madara is just a member of all creatures." Although because of his dream to jump out of the mortal boundary and become the first transcendent in history to open the Rinnegan, he always thinks that he is special. It's ridiculous to think that he is a god sent by God to save the world. In the end, Madara is just an important chess piece in Black Setsu's conspiracy that covers the world, and it's the most tragic kind. He was almost designed by Black Setsu all his life. "What do you mean by this guy?" Madara's eyebrows were slightly raised, and his tone was low and cold. He asked very unkindly. "He usually preaches others." Now Wuchen turned around and taught him a lesson. He felt more uncomfortable than eating 10 pounds of flies. Caw caw caw, a few hundred meters above the void, there was a crisp sound. Looking up, he saw that the green leaves that wrapped the bud were all withered and scattered, revealing the pink bud. For some unknown reason, the flower bud didn't bloom for a long time, and it gave off a weak feeling that it wasn't able to continue its growth. "That's the only way." Abito's eyes flashed with murderous intent. A man with a small head is not a man without poison. He naturally understood this simple truth. Living to this day, he had seen the darkness and ugliness of the whole world. His palms were clasped together, and cold sweat could be seen on his forehead. It was obvious that the technique he was about to release was rather strenuous for him. Caw caw caw, deep underground, at the roots of the divine tree, countless vines surged out in an instant, madly devouring the nutrients in the ground at an unprecedented speed. Everything in the world was devoured by the vines. The ground that came into contact with the vines turned pitch black after being devoured, and the humans that came into contact with it were directly sucked dry and turned into dried corpses. The scene was horrifying. Perhaps the essence of the tree of God is the highest level of predator. A look of understanding flashed through Dustless's eyes. Perhaps the divine tree was using the entire world as nourishment for its existence. This also explained the nature of its immortality. As long as the heavens and earth were not destroyed, the divine tree would exist forever. It was a predator at the top of the food chain, and the entire world was its target of bullying and plundering. After all, the existence of the divine tree relied on the entire world as nourishment. Sad technique, but it has nothing to do with me. With a sneer, Dustless turned a deaf ear to this bloody scene. The life and death of the people had nothing to do with him. It was already a blessing from the gods that he didn't harm the world. Expecting Dustless to save them was a fantasy. After about the time it takes to burn an incense stick, the huge pink bud of the divine tree finally bloomed, revealing a scarlet eye. The same eye was faintly reflected in the moonlight. What was not flattering was that it was not a 9-tomo Sharingan, but a 6-tomo Sharingan. However, even though it was only a 6-tomo Sharingan, it still retained a soul-stirring fluctuation of eye power. Seeing this, Obito's body also lost the shackles of gravity and slowly flew into the air, looking at the moon countless thousands of miles away. A look of fanaticism flashed in his eyes. More than 10 years of hard work, nearly 10 years of dreams, finally came true today. Infinite Tsukuyomi, no one can resist, no matter how strong a ninja is, they will be pulled into the dream world. You can't escape from that technique. Gritting his teeth and staring at Dustless, Madara said hatefully, because Dustless's sudden rise was his biggest failure, and the biggest stain in his life besides Hashirama. Hearing this, Dustless's eyes flashed with a playful look, and his eyes fell on Obito, who flew into the sky, and the Tensigan rippled, and his palm was facing Obito, and the void rippled like water waves, and the suction force gushed out. Get down for me. In the void, Obito was pulled by gravity, swaying and swaying, his body instantly lost its center of gravity, and as Dustless increased his strength, he fell from midair. Boom! The ground shattered, and a huge pit appeared. Obito's internal organs were dislocated, and his mouth was foaming with blood. If he wasn't the Jubi's Jinchuriki, he would have suffered such a blow. Useless waste, what's the use of you two? Black Setsu shouted hoarsely, and immediately the space behind him distorted sharply, and a body composed of black liquid drilled into it. The space then healed, and when it reappeared, it was already at Obito's side. Black Setsu. Staring at the strange behavior of Black Setsu, whether it was Madara or Obito, they were all puzzled, including Dustless, and they all looked at Black Setsu inexplicably. Especially Uchiha Madara's killing intent. Black Setsu was just his will, and he ignored his orders again and again, and acted alone. How could Madara not be angry? Heiju's next move surprised everyone, including Dustless. His face was full of astonishment. Chapter 370. Madara stared at Black Setsu angrily. Although he has been showing no change in his expression, everything has a bottom line. Black Setsu, who was created by himself, dared to challenge his bottom line, which has angered Madara. At the same time, he also planned to kill this eyesore after the end of this war. Black Setsu, this is not a place you can touch, stay away from me. Staring at Black Setsu with murderous eyes, Madara warned him in a tone that could not be disobeyed. If Black Setsu dared to disobey, Madara would obliterate him. However, Black Setsu directly ignored Madara's words, and the next sentence made Madara vomit blood, and his murderous aura began to rage uncontrollably. Your brain is still as stupid as your behavior, Madara. The liquefied Black Setsu sneered at Madara. His contemptuous eyes seemed to be looking at garbage that was not worth mentioning. His face was full of disappointment, and his tone revealed his disappointment, which directly ignited Madara's anger. Impudent! Who do you think created you? Uchiha Madara roared out like a cannonball. His arms full of explosive power went straight to Black Setsu, which was composed of black liquid. Stupid! Seeing this, Black Setsu just sneered, his liquid body surged, and a black iron rod shot out. This is Yin-Yang release. Madara's eyes flashed with horror. He didn't expect that Black Setsu could use Yin-Yang release, and this simple and casual appearance showed that he was extremely experienced in controlling it. Although surprised, Madara was also a veteran of many battles, and he also threw out a black iron rod. Clang! Along with the sound of metal clashing, the void splashed with sparks that disappeared in a flash. The two black iron rods were twisted together and curled into an unrecognizable shape like a fried dough twist. You people are just pawns for my mother's resurrection. A group of wastes want to shake the world. Ridiculous. Including you, Uchiha Madara. And dustless Uchiha Madara. The hoarse roar resounded through the sky, and Black Setsu wantonly played his inner pleasure. Over the years, he lived like a grandson under the feet of Dustless, Madara, Obito, and Nagato, and there was a shadow in his heart. The third son of Kagaya lived such a tragic life, which was indeed worthy of sympathy. Black Setsu is a perfect showman. Whether it's Madara or Obito, they were all fooled by him, and he was very happy. Madara's forehead even bulged with blue veins. He subconsciously looked at Dustless. Dustless was looking at him with a smile. That expression was clearly like watching a clown perform. My Madara-sama, haven't you realized it yet? The mother I'm talking about is Kagaya. That is, Otsutsuki Kagaya, the first person to have chakra. The powerful voice spread out, and Black Setsu's tone was proud, with banter and ridicule. At the same time, his eyes were focused on Obito. He looked at him with hawk-like eyes, obviously from the perspective of a hunter. Is it possible that this guy can resurrect Kagaya now? Absurd thoughts suddenly came into his mind, and Dustless couldn't help but take a cold breath, secretly calculating, and suddenly found that it was not impossible. Obito's current state is the same as Madara's. Although he did not release Infinite Tsukuyomi, he did not say that to resurrect Kagaya, he must open Rinnegan Sharingan and release Infinite Tsukuyomi to the world. You are just chess pieces in my script, Madara, since you got the body cells of Senju Hashirama and opened the Rinnegan. No, since the beginning of the Warring States period, you were the hero in my plan. But now it seems that your performance as the hero is also disappointing. It's my fault. Looking at Madara with a sneer, Black Setsu said, and then said to himself, you don't understand, it doesn't matter whether you understand or not. Anyway, everything will end. You dare to boast with my will, you're looking for death. Rinnegan surged, and the majestic eye power began to rage, focusing on Black Setsu's location. Madara also recovered his calmness and immediately shouted. Will Grave, border prison. A strong repulsive force spread out and engulfed everything that came into contact with it. Black Setsu was no exception. The black body that was made up of liquid was directly torn apart and scattered like ink. Boring. Seeing Black Setsu's body bursting, Madara sneered again and again. The waste created by him dared to boast, he really didn't know how to live. But before Madara could be proud, the scattered ink gathered again and condensed into Black Setsu's body again. Idiot, I've already said that my mother is Kagaya Otsutsuki. I'm the embodiment of my mother's will. Kagaya is immortal. Do you think that I, as her consciousness, will be killed by you? A hoarse and harsh voice sounded, and Black Setsu did not hesitate to attack Madara. Today, all the grievances of these years must be vented in one breath. Madara was livid, and even his breathing was heavy. The one he trusted turned out to be someone else's spy, and even said that he lived under his design all his life. Madara's killing intent was awe-inspiring. Usually, he was the one who calculated others, and suffered such a big loss. Even if his mentality was good, he couldn't bear it. However, Dustless has always been calm, and his look has never changed. Kagaya herself is the Jubi, and now it's just a wild beast without wisdom. Black Setsu is the consciousness of Kagaya. After the fusion of the Jubi, it's obvious what will happen. Immortal. It's really desirable. Seeing Black Setsu's body healed again, Dustless's eyes flashed with a fanatical yearning. Everyone wants to reach the peak of the realm. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.